new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going round that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth for this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a £5 in a pot and you can go in and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the park's hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. And what about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner, says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide ride surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed whack the rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it the channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine the Scouts to say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour ghost train.
Yeah.
Where everyone...
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning to you. Welcome to the show. This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. It's just coming up to 3 minutes past 10 o'clock. Got a rip-roaring show for you, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or your connected device. It's great to have your company. Coming up, we're going to be talking to Defence Minister Alistair Kearns in just a couple of moments, as Labour stands accused of backtracking on a commitment to spend 3% of GDP on defence by 2034. Oh, assuming they're in power then, by the way. That's just 3 days after the Defence Secretary said Britain will spend 3% in the next Parliament. John Healey then downgraded that to an ambition just yesterday. This comes as the government publishes its long-awaited Strategic Defence Review, which sets out the UK's 10-year defence plan. Keir Starmer will set out Britain's aim to build up to 12 nuclear-powered attack submarines, pledge £15 billion in the UK's nuclear warhead programme, and to construct at least 6 new arms plants. Also, Britain is on course for up to 50,000 Channel migrant crossings this year, after almost 2,000 boat arrivals came on Saturday alone. And junior doctors are better off now than they were a decade ago. That's according to analysis from the Nuffield Trust Health think tank. They say that despite claims from the British Medical Association, who are currently balloting for more strike action for a 22% pay rises, claims they are much poorer than they were 10 years ago. We'll talk about all of that, plus vaping. Oh yeah, and Pride Month is back again. Plenty more to come, and all of the chat we've been joined for by something like that, one of those words, commentator Sam Armstrong, who joins us every Monday morning. A very good morning to you, sir.
Good morning.
Always good to have time with you. Now, normally you and I get to have a long chat right now about all the big stories in the news, and we will do that a little bit later, because right now I'm delighted to say, on the day of the Strategic Defence Review being published, to welcome the Defence Minister, Alistair Kearns. A very, very, very good morning to you.
Thank you for having us on the show,
Well,
Judy.
thanks for joining us. Right, I mean, lots of announcements coming today, an awful lot of it already announced, let's be honest, in the papers over the last few days. The focus today, though, seems to be on not what you're announcing today, but what's going to happen in the future. And this rowback, this backtracking, some say a U-turn on this idea of a 3% of GDP pledge effectively by 2034, assuming Labour are in power for a second term. Is it a U-turn? Is it backtracking?
No, not at all. I have absolute confidence we'll move to 3%. The really interesting thing is those individuals in uniform now can look forward to 10 years of increased defence spending, and that provides a whole plethora of opportunities to change how we fight, change the technology we have, and ensure our men and women have the best capability, kit and equipment in their hands.
But it went from being something that John Healey, your boss, the Defence Secretary, said he had no doubt, in an interview that was published on Saturday, carried out just a few days beforehand, he had no doubt that 3% of GDP would be being spent by the end of the second term, and that's now downgraded to he has an ambition. Now, I mean, there's no doubt and there's an ambition. Those are different things. An ambition means it probably won't happen.
Well, no, I disagree. No one can tell where we're going to be in 5, 6, 7 years. What I would say is that both the Prime Minister and the Defence Secretary have said they've got absolute confidence we'll move to 3%, and I can almost pretty sure we will do. The reality is what we've announced today is that individuals looking forward will see 10 consecutive years of increased defence spending, which is absolutely huge. And that's money coming away from the development budget into defence industry, into those individuals across the country, creating up to 30,000 jobs, which is absolutely huge. And that's about reprioritising tax-paying money to be spent here in the UK, which is really, really important.
And I have to say, and I'm sure most of my audience, absolutely give big thumbs up to that, absolutely. Taking money away from the foreign aid budget, spending on the defence of this realm, absolutely. But you said that, crucially, no one can tell where we're going to be in the next few years. Isn't that the reason why we need to be spending a lot more? The Baltic states, Poland, other countries on the front line with Russia are spending an awful lot more. Donald Trump has said we need to move not just from the 2.3% of GDP we're currently spending, and by the way, that includes veterans' pensions. As vital and as important those are, they don't actually contribute to our ability to defend our borders today or in the next few years. Not just to 2.5%, which is the ambition target by the end of this Parliament, but actually up to 3%. Many other strategic experts are saying we need to be way higher than that. Isn't the fact that we don't know what's going to happen, and we have got that threat from China? The Defence Secretary of the United States, Pete Hegseth, reckons that China could be invading Taiwan imminently. We've got the threat from Ukraine. We've got a build-up of forces on the border of NATO members in the Nordic countries. Do we not need to be spending a heck of a lot more and achieving a heck of a lot more and recruiting a lot more men and women?
So what I would say, 14 years we didn't see an increase in defence spending. Since 2010. Right. Since 2010, this government's come in and we've hiked it straight to 2.5%. That has sent quite a strong message to both our adversaries. It's led a lot of our allies to increase defence spending, and it's signalled the right move from a US perspective. So I think it's really positive. We've said we'll move to 3% in the next Parliament, and I think that's more movement than we've seen in 14 years. And the really important thing is that it's being spent in the right way, moving that money from the development budget back into defence industry, jobs for British people in Britain, and doing the #1 role of any government, which is, of course, protecting the nation, the citizens that are within it.
Well, again, I fully support all of that. I completely accept your point that the Tories for 14 years didn't spend money. There was austerity in the early years. We've had all these other priorities, lockdowns, dealing with energy crisis after Ukraine, all of that. No excuse, we still have to defend our borders. But is it going to be enough? Finland, for instance, has reserves of 250,000 men and women fully trained. How many do we have?
Well, it's really interesting. What type of reserve you're talking about? This is where we need to stick to the facts. Okay. So we have a reserve force, but we also have a strategic reserve. Those individuals that leave, 6 years after they leave, they're still in the books, and they sit about 250 to 400,000. So, you know, the reality is we're taking this really, really seriously. That money that's being pushed in, we're looking at 15 billion, for example, into a new warhead program. We're talking about 12 new nuclear attack submarines.
Yeah, but they'll be 10 years minimum.
Of course they will take time.
And by the way, they'll cost twice as much as what you say they're going to cost.
They're really complex capabilities. But what's really important, Julia...
What's going to happen in the next... No, but what's going to happen... What about in the next couple of years?
So what I would say, you're going to see a huge amount of investment going in the next couple of years. You're going to see apprenticeships all over the UK.
How are we going to be safer?
To support the development of nuclear submarines and nuclear warhead capability. For example, we've just also put in an order for 7,000 new long-range missile systems. You know, they will take time to develop because it's cutting-edge technology. But what it does mean is that we're as any government will tell you, that the Army, the Navy and the Air Force will absolutely fight on the front line. But what wins wars and what is deterrent factor is primarily around industrial capability, economies, and of course our nuclear strategic deterrent.
Right.
And so that money's been focused into, from an individual who spent 24 years in the military, at the very cutting edge of, you know, some of the specialist bits as well. I'm telling you, a lot of this money is going to the right place at the right time. It won't happen in a short space of time, but actually, in the medium to long term, it's well put.
Okay, yeah, look, and again, I know you're an ex-military man yourself. You know what this actually means, but the reality is we realistically can't defend our own borders right now from a military attack, can we?
Well, I completely disagree with that. I actually think we have the best armed forces in the world.
Well, that's great.
The best capability in the world, and absolutely we can defend it. I mean, 24/7, while we're talking right now, there is a nuclear submarine subsurface somewhere under the sea that is protecting the very freedoms we enjoy. That is the ultimate guarantor of our deterrence theory, and it works exceptionally well. What we're saying from a Labour perspective is that we're going to put more money in it to make sure it's more effective over the longer term. And that actually, when you look at our adversaries, is one of the biggest things our adversaries fear, which is our subsurface nuclear capability.
Are you confident that in the event that a NATO member was attacked, one of the Baltic states, one of the Nordic states, that we know that Russia has aims within the Baltic states, which obviously share a border with Russia, that the NATO countries would stand by Article 5, and they would consider that an attack on one is an attack on all, and they would leap to the defence? Because a lot of people now are very wary that they wouldn't.
Yeah, so I've deployed on NATO missions, I've been on NATO exercises, I've been in high readiness forces in NATO when I was in the military. What I can say is that NATO is the most effective defensive alliance in history.
Not an answer to the question.
If you take the collective capability within NATO, you will see that actually it's a huge amount of both standing forces and capability. And I have no doubt that should anyone test NATO's Article 5, that we would absolutely rise to the occasion to defend the freedoms we enjoy.
You're saying we would, but you believe that the rest other NATO countries would?
So we, I mean collectively within NATO.
All right, here. Can we also talk about protecting our borders from not, armed Russians or any other sort of attack or cyber attacks from the Chinese or the Russians, but actually just from unarmed, undocumented men who just get on a dinghy on the beaches of Calais while the French police smoke their Gauloises and just relax and shrug and then come over to this country? A staggering 1,194 arrived on our shores on Saturday alone. It's a record. We're looking at realistically 50,000 largely young men of fighting age arriving on our shores. If we can't protect our borders from them, can we really trust we can protect our borders from an invading force?
So what I would say is we've been in government now for 10 months. We've removed 30,000 individuals. What I would also say is
Well, you haven't.
What I would say.
No. With all due respect, Alistair Cairns. With due respect,
what I'd say is we've pushed 30,000 people back.
Most of those were voluntary. They were voluntary. They weren't even deportations. Alistair Cairns, you're not talking about the same thing. You're not talking about 30,000 largely young men who've arrived on our shores on migrant boats. You're talking about people who've had voluntary repatriation to their country. That's not the same thing.
What I'm actually talking about is the Strategic Defence Review, which is one of the most and the biggest important announcements that we've made today.
It is, and we have spoken about that for some time, and it is a relevant question, is it not? Given that the first job of government is to defend our nation's borders. Are you confident, given that 2,000 largely young men arrived on our shores on Saturday, are you genuine? How can we defend our borders from a force with arms when we can't defend our borders from young undocumented men? They don't even have a passport, let alone a gun.
What I would say is be careful of the fickle one-liners you're getting from other parties that say that this is an easy fix. It's a multifaceted problem that needs a really, really deep strategic look at. And the Prime Minister's got this. And he's pushing really hard to work with the French, work with the Europeans collaboratively.
How's that working?
To deal with this migrant issue.
It's gone up. It's gone up by 40% since he's been in power.
It takes time to sort these problems out.
Why? I thought he was going to get round the table with Macron and it was all going to be fine.
People already. I would argue that your listeners would prefer to hear one of our answers. So
well, not if your answer is actually... no, the 30,000. Who are you referring to with the 30,000? Because I know who you're referring to, but you tell me who you think you're referring to.
So when I was in the military, we were tasked to have a look at the migrant issue. So how could the military support? And this links to Strategic Defence Review. And what we found actually that from a military perspective, given the rules of the sea and the legal parameters that are wrapped around this issue, is very difficult to deliver a single solution to the problem. This requires a multifaceted solution, which ranges from diplomatic engagement with the French, the Europeans, all the way through to legal and legislation moves. So what I would argue from a political perspective, we're looking at it in detail and we're working on it.
Okay, wait a minute. I thought we were just going to have a nice meeting with Macron and it was all going to be fine.
What I would say, Julia, is
that's what the Prime Minister said.
What I would say is we're here to talk about the Strategic Defence Review, which I think, from an ex-military individual who's now a minister within the Department of Defence, is a fantastic announcement that is looking at pushing money that was once going overseas back into the UK, giving people jobs, reprioritising taxpayers' money into the United Kingdom, up to 30,000 jobs, which is absolutely fantastic. And I think, from my perspective, as an individual who has a deep passion within the military, I think this is a fantastic news story. It's a fantastic impact for the country, and it demonstrates to our allies and our adversaries that we're taking defence really seriously.
OK. Would we be capable of carrying out the sort of audacious attack that Zelensky's forces carried out on Russian jets, taking out a third of Russian fighter jets, these particular kind, but also $7 billion worth with this audacious drone attack using, I would say, Israeli-style initiative. Would we be capable of any such sort of attack on our foes?
What I would say is that attack was absolutely remarkable. One of the key aspects of the Strategic Defence Review is taking the lessons from Ukraine and making sure that we act upon them here in the United Kingdom. That looks like drones, that looks like uncrewed systems, it looks like pairing some of the uncrewed capability and docking that in with some of our heavy artillery, tanks, aircraft and ships to make sure they complement each other. And I think that, and I've been really hard on this issue as well, to ensure that uncrewed systems are absolutely central in our capability suite as we move forward.
OK, just finally, the British government, particularly David Lammy, the Foreign Secretary, has been very critical of Israel and what they are doing in terms of their military efforts in Gaza to wipe out the terrorist group Hamas. What do you make of the varying different reports about an attack on civilians at an aid distribution centre in Rafah? Claims reported in widespread in the British and American other media that it was an attack by IDF forces, claiming that it was victims, doctors and others had said this was the case. IDF has denied this. Footage has gone out suggesting there was no attack at this distribution centre at the time when it is claimed it took place. People were treated with gunshot wounds, not missiles or shrapnel wounds as originally being claimed. What would be the motivation, do you think, for the IDF, were they to have been responsible, to shoot at unarmed civilians at a food aid distribution centre?
Well, I think if anyone's shooting at unarmed civilians in any way, shape or form, it's completely unacceptable. What I would say is, from both sides, we want peace, peace and peace. I've been really clear on this issue that the Israelis need to use the proportionate use of force.
Are they not?
The evidence, I'll leave others to have a look at the evidence.
Well, you say they need to be, are they not now?
So anyone from the military or anyone with my experience or anyone in my job now would say to you, and I'm pretty sure your viewers would agree, that we must ensure that both ourselves, our allies, our partners and anyone else use the proportionate use of force in line with the threat.
And are they not now?
I think if the armed forces stick to that, then they'll find themselves on the right side of the law and indeed on the moral argument as well.
Do you believe the IDF, presumably the government has looked into this, they've been very critical of the Israeli forces and the Israeli government for this policy. Do they believe that the IDF is responsible? And if so, what would be the motivation for IDF forces?
So I haven't looked at the specific issue. What I would say from my perspective is we implore both the Israelis to use the proportionate use of force when it comes to the threat.
Wait, just finally, when you were a fighting man yourself, what ratio of civilian deaths to combatant deaths was considered the norm?
Well, any civilian death is completely unacceptable.
But nevertheless, civilians die.
But we've got to accept, as you may know, I don't know if you've been to conflict zones of the past, I've been to lots. been on multiple tours of Afghanistan.
I bow to your greater knowledge, 100%.
And so what I would say is that usually in conflict there are civilian casualties, and it's a travesty every time it happens. So we implore, if you let me finish 2 seconds, we implore any armed forces or any military man, woman, to ensure that they minimise civilian casualties.
And the combatant versus civilian deaths is virtually 1-to-1 in Israel. Does that suggest that is a proportionate response?
I'll need to look at the evidence. I haven't looked at the evidence in that particular event.
All right, good to know. Very much appreciate you joining us. I completely accept the strategic defence view is the main story of the day. Absolutely, we talked about that at great length, and I very much appreciate you joining us. Defence Minister Alistair Cairns there, a Labour MP, of course. Thank you very much to him. Sam Armstrong. I mean, obviously, we want to put pretty much all the questions I put to the Defence Minister to our audience. So I want to know, particularly, are you concerned about Britain's ability to defend itself? It's as simple as that. Give us a call, 0344 499 1000. You can text the word talk in your message to 87222. You can get in touch on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. It's free on YouTube and it's free on X, and it's also free for Sam Armstrong to have his say right now. What do you make of what he had to say?
Well, the Tories ain't going to be scoring any points on defence. That's the truth of it. Labour has squared off this issue completely and utterly. Alistair Cairns, who's the Defence Minister, is himself a war hero. John Healey is widely respected by every Tory MP you speak to as the best Secretary of State in government. And what a contrast that is, just firstly, between now and where the Labour Party was a few years ago under Jeremy Corbyn, which is, if you cared about this country's defence, that was the best reason. Yeah, there were a few, but that was the best reason not to vote for him.
That was a big reason a lot of people voted for Boris Johnson and not Jeremy Corbyn in 2019.
That's right. The Labour Party have got serious about this issue. I feel very sorry for James Cartledge, the Shadow Defence Secretary, because they're just not going to be scoring any points on this issue.
Is there any defence for the Tories spending so much less and not giving up? I mean, most Western European countries didn't. But
3 points on that. Firstly, the overall picture was that after the Cold War, the entire Western world got just cocky, basically, and just assumed it didn't need to spend the amount of money that it needed to do.
Over.
The end of history, that's what they called it. They said it was that. Secondly, Britain continued to spend vastly more than our European allies, all of whom were loved by the left throughout that point. And people said, oh, what a wonderful social security system they had. Yeah, it was spent on with the money that should have been going on to defence. And thirdly, the Tories did spend over the course of 2%, over the course of those 14 years, more money proportionally than when they came in. And of course, they maintained that spending during austerity. And let's be clear, the Labour Party would probably, I don't think it's a controversial point, have spent slightly less. So it was a plague on all of our political classes across the Western world that thought, oh, we don't need to worry about defence anymore. We've solved that problem. Boy, was that hubris. But look, the Labour Party, the Tory Party, the one thing I would say, even Reform, I don't think there is a cigarette paper between any of them on defence policy.
And even the parties say, oh no, we could spend more. I mean, it's interesting. Even the Green Party and the Lib Dems, are solid on this. But again, I think the question is, okay, if you're going to spend more on these things, the money has to come from somewhere. So do you cut other spending or do you put taxes up? And this is my thing. When anyone goes, oh, we should spend more on defence, this stuff costs a fortune, whether it's fighting men or whether it's your nuclear submarines. You are talking about billions and billions and billions. Now, we are terrible at procurement. We have a very bad habit of letting people who are not bean counters, I think more bean counters should be involved. Philip Hammond actually was a great defence secretary in that, in terms of going, nope, cross, literally, oi, man with medals on, come in, tell me why we're spending this on this. We basically pay twice as much for everything. The French spend less than us, but they have more they have more bang for their buck, quite literally. So we need to start getting some people who understand procurement. Do I trust that this Labour government is going to be good at procurement? No. But the last Tory lot weren't either. But this is our money. But it's also about getting stuff in quickly. And we also have a habit of buying stuff like, oh, let's develop our own this or that. No, let's just buy something off the peg that we can use next week. I know it still has to take a long time to be made, but we do need to speed this up. The threat is real and the threat is imminent.
But there is a balance there, Julia, and I think it's an important one. On the one hand, you can buy good, very good American kit tomorrow off the shelf. It will be here exactly when we want it for half the price. The downside is all of that money is going into the American economy and not our own. If you want to make it in this country, it's going to take 10 years. Now, the upshot is you make, as Alistair Kern says, you get brilliant apprenticeships, you get men and women into engineering jobs, the kind of thing you can build an entire career out. And in the future, you can build a much better, bigger defence industry that can export stuff around the world. And that's the big trade-off. It's not a political point, this. It's
a little bit of both, so we can have some stuff a bit sooner. But again, it was interesting, actually. Another point that Alistair Kern's made was about the, you know, have a strong economy. And he's like, well, yeah, you can only have a strong economy if you don't have net zero and you've got cheap energy, then you can actually make this stuff yourself. Again, net zero is at the heart of everything. You cannot do anything that we want to do in this country while we still have net zero. Prime Minister, by the way, he said he wants to end the hollowing out of Britain's defences. He's speaking, as we know, in Glasgow ahead of the publication. Now, officially, there's going to be a statement from John Healey, the Defence Secretary, in the House of Commons this afternoon, and then they're going to publish a Strategic Defence Review. A load of it has been leaked already, but the PM has already said drones, destroyers, AI, aircraft, each different branch of our armed forces will be fully integrated to create an army which is 10 times more lethal by 2035. 10 times more?
Well, it needs to be, is the
answer. I mean,
answer.
I'm going to say, like, how bad is it now?
Well, the one thing, again, I really don't think defence is a political matter, which is why I try and approach it dispassionately. Yeah. But the one thing we're seeing, and of course in Ukraine, is just how quick things are developing, right? Yeah. The Russian cavalry, the tanks, the massive hordes of tanks they could send in used to be considered the world's most dangerous foe. You would be terrified of it. And they were brought down by guys with rocket launchers, drones and all the rest of it. War is developing so
we're always
quickly.
fighting the last one, aren't we? Well, we're going to be talking to Lord Dannatt. He's the former head of the British Army. He knows what he's talking about. As indeed, actually, all credit does Alistair Kern, the minister we just spoke to. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of this. Do get in touch, 03444 499 1000. I can already see on the board we've got a number of people calling who ex-fighting forces themselves about, you know, how confident are you? We also want to talk about, by the way, huge number of migrants crossing our borders. Nigel Farage sending the first Doge team into Kent Council, and oh yay, it's Pride Month again. It comes round so quickly every year, does it not? Mainly because I don't think it ever stops. 10:26 is the time. This is Talk.
Let's give those brave men and women who are in our jails the tools they need to do their job and feel safe. Let's give them baton rounds, tasers, high-neck stab-proof vests, which, I mean, it's amazing they don't have those already. And in our maximum security jails where they deal with these extreme high-risk people like Axel Rudakabana or Hashim Mabedi, let's ensure that there is a secure armoury where specialist officers can go and get access to lethal weapons. So if these situations, God forbid, arise, they can regain control of the prison quickly.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. It's coming up to 10:30. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong still with us. Going to get to your calls coming in thick and fast on defence in just a few moments. First up, though, Sam Armstrong, I do just want to bring in this figure, this 1,194, largely young men. They always are largely young men. We always get pictures of the women and the children, but largely young men who've arrived just on Saturday alone, as the French police did absolutely, I'm trying to think of it, nothing. Let's give it the word nothing. It wasn't the word I was thinking of. Very smoking, they got on the beach. I mean, they took photo. They did some videoing. To be fair, they did some videoing as I got their feet a little bit sandy. Up to 50,000 migrants, it's now predicted, are going to cross the channel this year. Very interesting to hear from the Defence Minister a few moments ago about, this is very difficult. It's a complicated business. We're going to do this. Look, but the reality is the Prime Minister hasn't dealt with it, and they've been in power almost 11 months now.
Border dash, right? Let's just start with the basics. Keir Starmer took office last summer. Have the numbers gone up or down since he came in? They've gone up. Why have they gone up? Well, one reason they have gone up is he cancelled the only deterrent. There was a potential deterrent in the form of Rwanda scheme. We saw when it was first announced that migrants that had got into the UK were making their way into the Republic of the Ireland because they were scared of it working. He cancelled that. He wanted to put international law ahead of it. So let's not hear another word out of him. Everything he promised us about smashing the gangs was a lie, is a lie. He knew it was a lie. He lied to us all. He knew about it. He knew it wasn't going to work. And they were laughing at us all the way.
Is it a lie,
through.
or did he genuinely overestimate his camaraderie with Emmanuel Macron?
Nobody on earth.
He should have dealt with Brigitte. It's clear who's in charge in that relationship.
Indeed. That's a bit of a slap in the face. Look, this is now, 10 months in, the point at which Keir Starmer is responsible. Look, if he'd done something, if he'd come up with a plan and on day one he'd said, look, this is what we're going to do, and it took 2 years, and he said, give us 2 years, I would say fair play.
Or if it was at the same level. It's 40% up on the same time last year.
It is up, and every one of those extra migrants is Keir Starmer's fault. And today
he's cost us 40-50 grand a year. And by the way, they're never going to be sent back. I did think it was outrageous that Alistair Carnes, the Defence Minister, saying we've sent 30,000 back. Not 30,000 Channel migrants. Virtually all of those people are voluntary repatriations. So not even. We've paid them. We've given them a flight and then paid them 3 grand to go home. They're not even deported.
And the Prime Minister today is talking about the security of this country. Let's be very, very clear. Every single individual that pays international criminals to break them into this country that are overwhelmingly fighting age males is a national security threat to this country. And if you think I'm being histrionic, just look at what we've seen, which we've now reached a point when the authorities in this country are saying that Iranian agents have smuggled people into this country in order to commit terroristic acts of violence. This is an active national security emergency. Terrorists are breaking into this country. They are coming here to kill people that are here already. This is wrong. This is dangerous. And I don't care how much you want to spend on new drones, new destroyers, new AI systems for the army. If you can't protect this country from an invasion of rubber dinghies, then you can't protect it from Russia, China, or the rest of them.
Exactly. The point I made to the Defence Minister, who kept sort of avoiding that conversation. Just finally, let's talk about something completely different before we go to a break. Pride Month. The month of June is now Pride Month. I lose track. I don't know when Black History Month is. I mean, I just lose track. There's a month, there's a day for everything. As far as I can tell, Pride is virtually much every day of the year. There is some sort of Pride festival. I mean, fine. Fill your boots. I tell you what I have noticed, though, this year, rather fewer of the old rainbow lanyards and the rainbow things all over people's X accounts, the official accounts of, the big supermarkets, the big businesses. There was a time when, you had to do all this. By the way, and not the rainbow flag. The really, really nasty, misogynistic, racist, homophobic flag, which is the one that's got the brown and the arrow in the middle of it. It's genuine. I think I consider it to be a woman-hating, gay-hating, white-hating flag. I really do. The old rainbow flag, love it, absolutely. It is fascinating, though, because even like the Lib Dems, they put out various tweets yesterday, and they talk about all the policies they feel strongly about and Pride Month. only one related to gay people. Everything else was about protecting things like, you know, the mutilation and drug giving to children who have been completely wrongly told that they're born in the wrong body. It was all about trans. This whole thing has become about trans as opposed to about being proud of being gay or bisexual after many, many years, or centuries, when it was a crime and considered something shameful. Pride is a wonderful thing, but is it time for it to all be over on the basis that gay people have the same rights as straight people now, and trans has got nothing to do with being gay?
Well, Britain is the least homophobic country, pretty much full stop, on earth. I don't think there's anybody in this country that has any issues around that.
I think there are people who are homophobic, but there's people who hate everybody.
Extreme minority, an extreme minority. What has instead occurred is a movement that is, as you say, a cause for celebration, has been hijacked by Britain-hating political activists that have attempted to not only push a dangerous agenda that has hurt women, has hurt children, has hurt a general sense of fairness in this country, but has also been used as a bat to hit this country. It is rammed down people's throats. It is told that people in this country are inherently homophobic. There's inherently something wrong with them. The reality is nothing could be further than the truth. The overwhelming majority of people in this country are enormously supportive.
Same-sex marriage was massively supported. I was a massive supporter of it. I mean, it was something that David Cameron brought in. You know, and again, people's views have changed hugely on this. But again, I don't think pride's almost got anything to do with being gay anymore. I think it's just been completely and utterly, as you know, Stonewall and everything, it's just completely and utterly taken over. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. 0344 499 1000. So much more to talk about. First, though, I've got another competition for you. Yes, we're giving you the chance to win FIFA Club World Cup final tickets thanks to our friends at DAZN. Here's everything you need to know.
Hi, it's Jim White here. Here at talkSPORT, we're gearing up for the Club World Cup in the United States. And to celebrate, we've got 2 tickets to the final in New York on July the 13th to give away. We'll sort flights, accommodation, and give you £5,000 spending money to spend however you like. 18 plus, UK excluding Northern Ireland. All you have to do to enter is text the word football to 83338 by the 13th of June at 11 p.m. and you're in the draw. Text costs £2 plus 1 standard network rate message. You must have the bill payer's permission, or send your name and number by post to Club World Cup Final Prize Draw, P.O. Box 3190, Colchester CO2 8GP, to arrive by 5 p.m. on June the 18th.
This is a TalkSPORT limited competition run on TalkSPORT Talk and Virgin Radio UK stations. Full terms and conditions at talksport.com.
Thanks, Jim and Mike there. Do not miss out on this incredible giveaway thanks to our friends over at DAZN. Very good luck to you. 10:37 is the time. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:39 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000. A lot of you calling in. I'm asking as Labour stands accused of backtracking on a commitment to spend 3% of GDP on defence by 2034. Of course, that assumes they're getting a second term in office. I mean, really? On those polls? But are you concerned about Britain's ability to defend itself? Huge announcement from the Prime Minister. He's been speaking just a few moments ago, and just huge announcements about nuclear-powered subs, munitions factories, you name it. We are spending big. But is it going to be enough? Let's go to your calls. Tony's on the line. He's in Staffordshire. Very good morning to you, Tony. What do you want to say?
Hey up, my dude.
Hey up.
I wanted to talk about defence.
Yeah.
Well, I joined the army in 1975, so I'm an old fossil now.
Yeah.
When I joined the army, they talk a lot about the Cold War. You're talking about the Cold War today. Need to go back to Cold War times. We had 165,000 troops in Germany. We had a battalion, and you're talking roughly of 750 to 1,000 men. We had a battalion in Hong Kong. We had a battalion in Cyprus, and we had garrisons of multiple thousands of men in the UK. Not only that, we had 75 to 80,000 troops in Northern Ireland.
Mm-hmm.
If we got all the blokes in the army today, we could not do Northern Ireland alone.
No, I know, it's fascinating. I think certainly even post-Cold War we had 40,000 troops stationed in Germany. And again, we've only got, 70,000 right now in total?
Yeah.
Now, the Defence Minister I spoke to said we've got an awful lot of reservists, got a lot more reservists. A lot of people think men and women who've left the service in recent years, who are still trained up, who can still be recalled, and other reservists as well. Do you feel that actually they can talk a lot about nuclear subs, they can talk a lot about jets, but actually at the end of the day, we don't have enough fighting men and women?
Well, I don't know whether you listened to Mark's show earlier, but there was a caller called in, and he was talking about soldiers on the ground who fire shoulder-launched weapons.
Mm-hmm.
All right? Doesn't matter how much you bomb Ukraine or Russia, don't matter how much you bomb it, you've got to have a boot on the ground to occupy the ground, else it's a total waste of time.
As we've seen, exactly. Lots of people have reviewed in the last few years, well, it's going to just be cyber warfare, it's going to be war in space. This idea, it's going to be robots fighting, it's not going to be men on the ground in the trenches. Well, things have kind of changed now, haven't they, after Ukraine?
Well, that's it, though, I mean, well, it has changed in the fact that way people look at it. It's never changed. It's always been the same. You can't take a piece of ground unless you've got a boot on it.
Yeah, and in terms of if you blame people for not spending the money they should do, and I don't know why we always talk about money, because to me I need to know what do we need. And then we spend the money on that. Because it's one of those things, you wouldn't just say, like, if your roof was caving in your home, you wouldn't go, well, I've got a budget of 5,000. Well, if that's not even touching the side of the conservatory, you're not going to get your roof mended, are you? We need to know we're safe. So how much will that cost? And what do we need for it? And let's do it. But who do you blame for the fact that we've got to this position? Is it the politicians? Is it a particular party? Is it civil servants? Is it military chiefs? Who?
Well, I really don't know a lot about civil servants, although I work for the civil service, to be quite honest. But it's got to be the military themselves and the government, because they're all fighting amongst each other for their own little bit of kudos and their own little weapon or their own little place, what they want. They've got to get together, put their heads together and sort out what is really best for everybody.
What we actually need. Tony, thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Ian is on the line. He's in Bridgend. Very good morning to you, Ian. What do you want to say?
Oh, hello, Julia. Yes, first off, very well done on asking the question that we all had on the tips of our tongues. What about protecting our own borders? Yes, indeed. But the thing is now, talking about this weaponry, what are we going to build it with? Chinese steel, is it?
Don't.
You know, we need a lot of clean water to construct weapons. Again, you know, we've got a shortage of reservoirs. What about these civil defence measures? I don't think hiding under the stairs will cut it this time, will it? You know, is there going to be a massive rebuilding of nuclear fallout?
Our little Anderson shelters at the bottom of the garden. We can put them next to our heat pumps.
It's bonkers.
Language.
I think this is all distraction for Starmer again. I hope the Guardian and the BBC Channel 4, they'll be at this press conference as well, and they'll press him, you know, with a newly found line of attack. Then.
You say it's a distraction. Distraction from what? Do you think that Keir Starmer doesn't actually believe in this? Because I was just thinking that actually the fact that there's no brownie points within the Labour Party for him doing this. I'm dreading, what is he hearing in his briefings that tells him that he's actually has to spend the money when there isn't any money at the moment? That scares the living daylights out of me, what he's actually hearing behind the scenes.
That's right, you know. Well, we know he doesn't seem to believe in anything. You know, he's given his script to read, and off he goes. I don't think a single thought, you know, passes from one ear to the other in his head. It's crazy.
You mentioned earlier about that question I asked our Defence Minister about how can we protect our borders from, you know, a military attack when we can't even protect it from unarmed men without a passport coming over on dinghies. Are you concerned about that threat?
Yes, exactly. You know, every day it's affecting every aspect of life in this country, and the politicians, they just seem to come out with these word salads and everything carries on. You know, our mutual friend, President Trump, you know, he sorted it out. A 93% reduction in illegal crossing of the southern border. Turned out all they needed in America was a new president.
Yeah, who knew? Amazing we can't do it ourselves, eh? 10:46 is the time. Thank you very much indeed for that, Ian. Quick word on that from Sam Armstrong. Big smile on your face when he said that.
Well, the truth is, as all of our callers will say, and that they all confirm every day, that they listen to politicians saying the world, promising the world, saying that they're going to do all this stuff, and they just don't believe them. Why? Yeah. Because they've heard it all before.
And that is the key thing, isn't it? I'd love to hear more of your calls. 0344 499 1000. Lots more to come. Up next, also going to be talking about doctors. They claim they're massively worse off in the last 10 years, despite that big pay rise a couple of years ago. New report from the Nuffield Health think tank says they're actually an awful lot better off. So who's telling the truth? Well, we'll talk to a resident doctor. She says, no, that report is wrong. We'll find out why up next. This is Talk.
What we saw last week was the first time that Reform sort of dipped a toe into anything that wasn't really detailed immigration policy on the economy, made a lot of big spending commitments. It gave his struggling opponents suddenly a chance to really rip into reform, and the numbers, frankly, didn't really stack up. We need to see... Sorry, I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Bloody hay fever. I'm going to sneeze again, but I'm going to keep trying to make this point while I do it. I didn't sing for you, but I will do a comedy turn nonetheless.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Very good morning. Welcome back to the show. 10:50 is the time. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Let's talk about doctors. They're being balloted for strike action right now over demand for a 29% pay rise. Nice work if you can get it. The healthcare workers, now known as resident doctors, not junior doctors. I think residents are far more representative of the level of skill they've got. They're asking for that pay rise on top of the 5.4% this year. Comes on the back of a 22% increase last summer, although that covered 2 years and was backdated. But they have been claiming that they are a lot worse off since the austerity years under the Tories, and they're still trying to make up their missing salaries. Meanwhile, a new report out from the Nuffield Health Trust has said that actually junior doctors are better off now than they were a decade ago. So which is true? Well, let's ask resident Dr. Basha Mukherjee, who joins us right now. Good morning to you, Basha.
Good morning, Julia.
Thanks for joining us. So I don't understand. I mean, we know what your salaries are in terms of, different pay rates for different skill levels and the like. We know how much they've gone up or not gone up. How is it possible to have one group saying, oh, we're worse off, and the other group saying, oh, no, they're much better off? Which is true?
I think the question here is that the state of the NHS at present, and you would agree that it's really difficult to get an appointment with GPs. I have patients who come in and consistently say how difficult it was to get an appointment. And as a result, they're coming in with 3, 4, 5 problems in a 10-minute appointment. They are struggling to get appointments at secondary care. The waiting lists have started going up again as of March. So overarchingly, the NHS is becoming a much more difficult place to work at. And there are better avenues that doctors are defecting to, including private health, other countries, and this is what we need to stop the NHS just falling on his knees. We just need to stop this mass exodus of doctors, essentially.
Right, that was a lovely answer. Would you now like to answer the question I asked you?
You'd have to repeat your question.
Oh, sorry. Apologies for that. How is it possible that the Nuffield Trust is saying that you are better off than you were 10 years ago, but the BMA on your behalf, and again, bearing in mind, you talked a lot there about GPs. You're a resident doctor. You work in a hospital. You don't work in a GP surgery. We're not talking about GPs. GPs are doing just fine, thank you. The ones who can actually get a job. Plenty of people are being trained to be GPs and they're not able to get a job, which is madness in itself. But how come the Nuffield Trust thinks you're better off than you were 10 years ago, and the BMA, your representative union, thinks you're worse off?
I can't speak for the Nuffield Trust, what they've, who they've questioned, but what I can say is that although you might think that resident doctors are only in hospitals, but actually lots of resident doctors do work in GP, I being one of them. I can definitely speak for my time in hospitals as well. The picture is much the same. I can only speak for the people that are represented by the BMA, and that is a large majority of resident doctors or junior doctors. And the ones that work in the NHS, what we can say is that when you compare with what we can afford with the money that we are paid with, which is essentially inflation taking into consideration, the money doesn't stretch very far. Well, we are unable to afford housing. We're unable to afford daily living. We're having to have side jobs.
Hold on. So do you mind? I mean, sorry. I mean, I haven't got the exact figures here on what each person is earning. I'm of the view that doctors who got, load of grade AA levels in hard subjects and 7 years of training and then working as a resident should be paid very well, and certainly a damn sight more than a train driver on 70 grand. I know you're not on a high pay as resident doctors. GPs, consultants, yes, but most resident doctors, I think, are not paid adequately for their skill set. However, there are plenty of people who earn far less than you who are perfectly capable of affording to rent or buy a home and to live their lives. So that's just an abject nonsense.
But it's a question of what else is out there. The truth is that we are having so many doctors leaving the NHS because the prospects are better if they move on to private health or if they move to other countries. And that is what we need to stop.
We have a problem with retention. We have a problem with recruitment. And I think part of that may be money related. It's also down to the sort of trials and tribulations of the jobs itself. However, the vast majority of people who train as doctors in this country are not sodding off to New Zealand or Canada to work. And they're not going into private. There's only so much work in the private healthcare service. Most people who work in the private healthcare actually work in the NHS as well. I had a family member offered a cataract operation in 6 months' time. Oh, but you can have it on Friday if you go privately. I mean, maybe if that NHS consultant did a bit more work in their health service, she wouldn't have had to wait that long on the NHS. But the Nuffield Trust, a health think tank, they know what they're talking about. This is literally what they do for a living. They say that the BMA, when they claim they're poorer now than 10 years ago, that's because they're using the RPI measure of inflation as opposed to the CPI, the Consumer Price Index, which is a measure of inflation. You're talking about, real terms, income. And if you compare the rise in prices in the last 10 years, she said, the reporter the researcher from the Nuffield Trust, Lucinda Rolowich, says that actually doctors are 8% better off than they were a decade ago. Not, as they claim, the BMA, 22% worse off.
So, I mean, it is not just about the money.
Oh, I thought it was all about the money a minute ago.
The money goes a long way. The money, if we do manage to retain more staff, recruit more staff, we know that is going to make a huge difference to the condition of working for the current doctors.
So what else is it then?
It's overall, the emphasis being on valuing the staff and retaining the staff so that the NHS looks different than it is.
What do I say? Valuing the staff. Do you not feel valued? I mean, we came out and we did that for you every Thursday for months. We banged on pots. People are constantly thanking you. You're like the 8 nurses and doctors in the NHS are sort of given a sort of saint-like aura, as if you're doing it out of the goodness of your hearts, as opposed to a paid job. But I mean, do you really not feel valued enough? I mean, you try being a journalist or an estate agent or a lawyer. They're not really valued.
No, for sure. All jobs, that you've mentioned today, they are difficult. But it's really difficult.
Oh, no, I'm not crying. I'm saying we're not valued. We cope. Do you need to, what would make you feel valued? Do you want people coming up to you and just sort of hugging you in the street? What do you want?
If you ask me personally, if there were more doctors across the board to share the load, and if there was better staffing levels on any given day, so that our patients would be feeling less, unhappy with our services, the service that I personally deliver, I wish I could deliver a better standard of service.
You could do your job better, and a lot of people in the healthcare system. So why, if given that the NHS budget has gone up hugely under COVID and since COVID, but we've actually interestingly seen fewer operations, fewer treatments carried out despite all that extra money. Productivity has gone down. Why is that? Why are the wrong people being hired? Are we spending too much on HR and DEI staff who are paid more than you, or is there a problem of another kind?
I think it's multifactorial, and I will say staff retention is a big part of it because continuity is a big part of delivering good level of care. And unfortunately, from my experience in working in the hospitals, staffing levels were always undermet, and that meant that you're seeing a new doctor each time. I work in a GP surgery, and I see patients all the time who complain, I have to tell my story again, and we're wasting more time in just repeating these stories rather than
that's a management issue at the GP surgery, though, isn't it?
I think it's across the board.
GPs working part-time, not full-time.
Well, this is the point. People who are not actually, maybe leaving the NHS, they're finding other ways to cope, and that means actually taking more time off
well,
work.
also GPs are now paid so much they can afford to work part-time.
Well, you know, I know a lot of GPs, for one, that are actually also doing side hustles.
They've got, wait a minute, they're so stressed and they're so, but they've also got another job. I mean, you can hear the music. The music that tells us the time is against us. But Basha Mukherjee, who's a resident doctor, very much appreciate you joining us. I'm not sure I'm any more the wiser after that. I'm going to get Sam Armstrong's thought on that. I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. Lots and lots of calls coming in about the defence budget and whether or not actually we can protect ourselves, even from unarmed migrants on channel boats. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
We've been talking this morning about a new theme park which is going to be built. The Universal Studios apparently are going to build in Bedfordshire. We've been asking many of you to give us some ideas for theme parks. Alison in South Wales says in the new theme park at 5 p.m. every day they could have the PIP parade. All the people driving their brand new Motability cars.
Instead of the water rapids, you can have a road you go down that's full of potholes in a car with bad suspension and flat tyres. I don't know why they're bothering building a theme park in this country. They're going right, no one will be able to afford to go to it anyway.
How about the Rachel Reeves ride, says Terry in Birmingham. You go round and round and vanish up your own deficit. It's the HS2 ride. It travels at high speed for 10 feet, where everyone gets off and into the replacement bus ride. Tickets are £50 if bought 5 months in advance, or £1,000 on the day.
There's a strong rumour going round that Rachel Reeves is going to have a kissing booth for this theme park. So what I do, mate, I shove a £5 in a pot and you can go and fill your boots.
Thank you very much indeed, and very generous of you. One from G, who says fast-track entry to every ride for illegals, plus a free night stay in the Parks Hotel and free food. New theme park bumper cars will have to pay a congestion charge, and the funhouse isn't built yet, despite Angela Rayner's pledge to build houses. And what about Ghost Train doesn't move because the driver's on strike? Have a good day. This is brilliant for the theme park. How about grow your own cannabis farm? Yeah, that's a good one. An Ethiopian safari park narrated by Angela Rayner. Says Gary in Durham. How about that? This sums up the Labour Party to me. The one idea they have to improve growth for the economy is to basically have a bloody big fun fair. It's the type of idea primary school children would pitch, given 10 minutes to come up with something. Well, it turns out, Matt, in Royston, that it's not even their idea. But they're now trying to claim it's their idea, even though it was actually the Tories.
They have done brilliantly on breakfast, but you know on Drive you've done brilliantly as well. Downhill slide rides surrounded by ULEZ cameras so that people are fined on exit. Love it. You could have a Birmingham-themed whack the rat stall. If you whack the rat, you can have your bin emptied for free. On the Labour theme park, a house of mirrors where they're all boarded up because they can't bear to look themselves in the eye.
I've got a great one for you, mate.
This is for the is this for the Universal theme park run by Labour?
Moat right around the park.
Yeah.
With loads of dinghies. Call it a channel and say anyone who can break in, all is free.
Imagine the Scouser say you can break into a theme park for free.
Hi, Jeremy. Hey, it's simple. You've got the Labour ghost train.
Yeah.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very, very good morning. Welcome back to the show. It's just coming up to 3 minutes past 11 o'clock. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube, or you're connected to my, so lovely to have your company. We are talking about defence of the realm. Labour stands accused of backtracking on a commitment to spend 3% of GDP on defence by 2034. Although what's fascinating is the idea of any Labour government committing to anything past the next election, given the current polls. But just 3 days after saying that Britain will spend 3% in the next Parliament, and a statement from John Healey saying he had no doubt that we would be spending that money. The Defence Secretary yesterday downgraded it to just an ambition. Well, this morning, Keir Starmer has been announcing the long-awaited Strategic Defence Review, setting out the UK's 10-year defence plan, with Britain's aim to build up to 12 nuclear power attack submarines, £15 billion pledged in the UK's nuclear warhead programme, and constructing at least 6 new arms plants as well. though a lot of people are wondering, and it was a question we did put indeed to a Defence Minister we spoke to a little bit earlier, about how we can defend the realm when we can't even defend ourselves against the migrant crossings. Unarmed men haven't even got passports, let alone rifles, but almost 2,000 boats arrived. Actually, it's more, someone 1,200 boats arrived on boat arrivals on Saturday alone. But looks likely to be some 50,000 migrant crossings this year. Meanwhile, let's talk about the Attorney General, Lord Herman. Oh, I'd never heard of him before he was appointed either, but he's one of those human rights lawyers that's been on the wrong side of pretty much everything. Reparations for Caribbean islands, surrendering the Chagos Islands, you name it, when he's facing more calls to resign after he likened Reform and Tory politicians to Nazis. Yes, absurdly. Now it's emerged he refused to review unduly lenient sentences given to a rapist, a paedophile and a terrorist fundraiser, despite happily signing off on the prosecution of Lucy Connolly for writing a tweet. And from Sunday yesterday, trans-identifying men are no longer allowed to play in women's football in England. This is after the new Football Association rules came into effect following the Supreme Court's landmark ruling that the legal definition of a woman is based on, I know, crazy, biological sex. We'll be talking about that with Sharon Davies as well. All that coming up, plenty more besides. And joining me for all the chat is commentator Sam Armstrong. Very good morning to you.
Good morning.
There are so many calls I want to get to in this half hour about defence, because we are asking, basically, are you concerned about Britain's ability to defend itself? You can give us a call on 0344 499 1000, text the word talk and your message to 87222. You can also send us a message on X at talkTV. Calls are charged at the national rate, text cost 1, standard network rate message. Sam Armstrong, I'll put that question to you. Are you concerned about Britain's ability to defend ourselves?
No, I'm not, actually. What I am concerned about, however, is our willingness to defend ourselves, because we know that this country is still the same country that did all of those things in the last century, that reclaimed the Falkland Islands, that fought the Second World War and did everything else. When we are spending lots and lots of money on a more advanced military than we've ever had before.
We couldn't defend the Falklands now. We've had military leaders telling us that. We're going to talk to the former head of the British Army, Lord Dannatt, in the next hour.
Well, what I don't doubt is that the British Army, the British Air Force and the British Navy are absolutely ready and willing to do it, and I do believe actually they do have the capacity to do so, given Argentina's actually pretty parlous military. But time and time again, what I see going wrong with this country is not the lions at the front line. It's not even the equipment that those lions are sent out to fight with. It is the mice behind them. It is the cowards that we have in political leadership that refuse to use them to do what they're sent there to do in the first place. And look, you only have to look at what is going on in the Channel right now. We have Coast Guard planes that can track every single one of these vessels.
We've got drones.
We've got a Navy. We've got a Coast Guard, all of which are equipped to do exactly what needs to be done, which is to intercept and return every one of these boats. That's a perfectly legitimate way of ending this problem tomorrow. We are not prepared to do so. Why? Because we have placed international treaties, international laws ahead of common sense. Yeah. And the common sense says, actually, do you know what? It's not in anyone's interest for this to carry on because people keep drowning in the Channel. The safest thing to do is, yes, it might be dangerous in the short term.
I'm more concerned about having to pay 50 grand to keep these people and having people who are undocumented. If people want to get on these rickety boats, genuinely, they want to pay for the privilege of getting on these rickety boats, I've got to be honest with you, I've not got much sympathy if they drown in the Channel. I've got sympathy for the children and any people who've been coerced onto the boats. But I'm sorry, otherwise, you pay your money, you take your choice.
But even on the terms of these human rights leaders, right, these human rights lawyers that we see, leaders, they're not leaders, these lawyers that we see, they say in order to keep people safe, the British public has got the British state rather has got an obligation to keep people at sea safe. The trade that they have enabled is deeply dangerous. It is leading to people die. It's going to continue to do so. It's awful. It's heinous. And yet we are told that there is absolutely nothing we can do. That is nonsense. If we were to put any of our callers that call in every day on this channel, if we were to make Julia Hartley-Brewer Empress of the Channel, and give you the authority to end it tomorrow, you would do so. It is purely and utterly a matter of willingness, a matter of, are you prepared to be unacceptable, unpopular, a little bit iffy at a dinner party? If you're prepared to do that, you can end it. So to go back to your question, am I concerned about our ability to defend ourselves? No. But boy, am I prepared about our politicians' willingness to do so.
And that's the thing, and that is absolutely crucial thing, isn't it? Well, let's tell you a few things that Keir Starmer said in his announcement this morning. It's going to be the actual review itself, and it's all been dribbled out already over the weekend. But the review itself is going to be published this afternoon when Lord John Healey, the Defence Secretary, reads a statement to the House of Commons. But the UK's defence policy, Keir Starmer said this morning, will always be NATO first. He said the strategic defence review will make Britain a battle-ready, armour-clad nation. He said we are moving to war-fighting readiness as the central purpose of our armed forces. He said he's 100% confident spending plans set out in the review will be delivered. He did refuse to rule out a further raid on the foreign aid budget. They've already raided it already to pay for his, quote, his ambition, he used that word again, ambition of increasing defence spending to 3% of GDP. He said at one point, drones, destroyers, AI, aircraft, each different branch of our armed services will be fully integrated to create an army which is 10 times more lethal by 2035. And he said a defence dividend that will be felt in the pockets of working people and the prosperity of the country, securing growth for generations to come, is what he was going to deliver. That's about spending the money back here in the UK and investing in jobs and factories here. All in favour of all of this. We're going to be battle ready by 2035. The reality is, though, the threat to Ukraine is right now. The threat to the Baltic states is in a couple of years' time, to Poland, to the Nordic states as well. We've seen Russia amassing troops. Why? Here's the thing. Why Vladimir Putin would think that he could get away with any of these things, you've got to wonder. But he kind of did get away with Ukraine. You've got an American president basically saying, I'll walk away from this. This is Biden's war. It's not my problem. May not give any more aid. We'll see how he actually finally wakes up. I mean, he seems to be waking up to the fact that Putin's got him around his little finger and is making him, frankly, look like a schmuck. Yep. Is what Putin is making Trump look like. But the possibility that the biggest military power in the world could walk away from Ukraine, and the negotiations, there seems to be just a blanket view that, well, as long as you can provide a security guarantee for the 80% of Ukraine that remains in Ukrainian control, that you give away Crimea and the Donbass. Well, I'd call that a victory for Vladimir Putin. That red line that Obama drew in Syria way back when, remember, was it 2015? Red line, if you cross it with a chemical attack, well, Assad did. Nothing happened. At the end of the day, you think, why would Putin do anything so stupid as to invade the Baltic states or anything like that? But why would he invade Ukraine? Oh, because he didn't think there would be any response from the West. Why not? Because we are not battle ready, we are not battle willing. Was it only 40% of Brits and Americans said they'd be willing to fight for their own country? Not even for another country, for their own country. The West is weak, not just militarily, morally, and in terms of just willingness, in terms of courage, just willing to stand up for what our countries represent, which is freedom and democracy and the rule of law.
Yeah, and look, it goes further back than that. I mean, Putin first invaded Ukraine because he got away with invading Georgia back in 2008. Yep. Then he started invading Ukraine with the Little Green Men. Then he invaded Crimea in 2014, and he got away with it right the way back then. And what does he do? He keeps striking and striking and striking. And let me tell you something. Let me tell you who isn't weak. Let me tell you who hasn't been cowardly. The Ukrainian people.
Oh my gosh.
It used to be said that Russia was the second most powerful military on earth. At times it has only been the second most powerful military in Ukraine. Why? Because when the rubber hit the road, the people of Ukraine stood firm, they held their ground. When American leaders were telling President Zelensky to get out of there on a helicopter, he was saying, I don't want to rise, I want to fight these people. He did, he stood firm, and he defended his country. And that is ample evidence, right?
Yeah.
Ample evidence, all the evidence you can need, that even though we are not that power that we once were, even though that we are fallen in so many different ways, if this country believes in itself, if those and our allies share that moral belief, as you put it, that philosophical force once more, if we're prepared to invest, yes, but stand firm, to show some backbone, to recognise that we are the shining light, the beacon on a city hill, if we are prepared to do that, then China, Russia, Iran, I don't care who, will never stand a chance.
No, exactly.
This country, the West, all of us need to do nothing more than to believe in ourselves once again.
Yeah, and again, so much of that undermining is happening via, actually, the bots, the infiltration of our sort of political and business and every world, the whole social media, everything. This infiltration of these people who just sort of want to undermine us. This is the fifth column, and it really is. This is not a conspiracy, guys. This is totally true.
And Julia, just to be clear, that you'll see plenty in the media class that are saying, "Oh, that Russians are spreading far-right ideas," and they are, because it undermines us. Do you know who else they're putting money behind? Net zero activists.
Oh yes.
Far left radical race baiting activists. They are pouring money into anybody that makes us question ourselves, that divides this country, that undermines it, and that starts really in the biggest way with net zero. Why? Because it has made us incredibly dependent on these countries for gas, and because it has destroyed our capacity to manufacture.
It happens in our media, it happens in our schools. It's happening not just over those feelings, but also again countries we can learn from: Ukraine, Israel. Extraordinary willingness to stand up and unite against an evil force of the terrorists and Hamas. What do you make of these claims and counterclaims, these denials that again reported as fact by the BBC, Sky, and everyone else, CNN, everyone, that IDF forces fired on Palestinians, killing dozens, injuring well over 100, including women and children who were just getting food aid near Rafah in Gaza. This is from this new humanitarian food hub set up by Israel, keeping the UN out. A lot of the claims, I mean, the doctors saying they were taking gunshot wounds. The initial claims were there was some sort of missile attack or some attack that wouldn't involve guns. We've got footage that's been put out by the aid organisation of a 15-minute period round when we're told gunfire was opened on these people at this time. Well, there's 15 minutes showing no gunfire, no issue there at all. I don't know what happened. I wasn't there, but I find it extraordinary. We've seen some backtracking by the BBC and others. Again, most trusted news source in the world, we're told. But just like, we've got the people telling us this, we've got the doctors telling us this, we've got the aid agencies telling us it must all be true. None of those people are able to speak unless Hamas has said it's okay. What I can't work out, and it's a question I put out on social media, and it's a question I put to the Defence Minister, Alistair Carnes, a few moments ago, is what would be the motivation for IDF forces to open fire on civilians at a humanitarian food aid supply depot?
Yeah, well, look, let's be clear.
Why?
It would be grossly against their interests. Here's what I would say. It's a war zone. There's going to be threats all the time. There might well be gunfire. And when there is gunfire, word will spread quickly. And, everybody knows that a lie will travel around the world twice before the truth has got a chance to get its trousers on. Having said all of that, as you rightly point out, you cannot report in Gaza unless Hamas, a literal terrorist organisation, says you can. So I would be viewing every single piece of information that comes out of that place with deep, deep cynicism. And the BBC doesn't.
And we know that Hamas have lied repeatedly. I mean, so many times they've stated things as fact, reported as fact, and then are completely debunked, but no one reads the debunking.
Well, Julia, I take a broad view, which is if you're prepared to chop babies' heads off, you're probably prepared to tell a few lies to the BBC. These people are animals. They are evil. They are prepared to stop at nothing, no nothing, in order to get their way. And what do they want to achieve? The total and utter destruction of Israel and the Jewish people.
But it was very interesting. Jeremy Bowen on Radio 4, who's just a completely busted flush. Someone I used to really admire, but I'm absolutely shocking, a lot of his reporting in recent months. But he was saying, look, as you know, we're not allowed to have reporters inside Gaza. IDF, the Israeli forces don't allow us. I can only think it's because they don't. The only explanation for that, he said, is because they don't want us to know what's going on there. Or the other explanation might be that you're going to be taken hostage, and then they've got more hostages to deal with, and you're only going to be able to get access to anything that is propaganda, and then you'll be spewing out more propaganda. Because, funnily enough, as a general rule, we don't allow journalists to enter, war zones that we control. I mean, we don't. Funnily enough. I mean, when we were, we had borders, they were embedded, with the forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. They weren't allowed to just wander freely where they felt like it, because they would be at risk.
And by the way, just a reminder for those that are catching up or a little bit slow, Gaza has two borders. It shares two borders. It has one with Israel, about whom we hear so very much. It has one with Egypt, about whom we hear absolutely nothing.
It's funny how, I don't know why the Egyptians don't open it, let all the people out of Gaza, or let all the aid in. I don't know, but the aid is going in. What I find fascinating, I mean, the only people, of course, who don't want this aid to happen, we know that Hamas, we know this has been verified, Hamas telling people don't take the aid. These people apparently are starving. I think it was the newspaper had a picture on the front page of a woman with her kids, you know, looking, obviously everyone's very upset, and these women, you know, starving people of Gaza. I mean, the woman ain't missed a square meal in a number of years. I'm just saying. It's like all those women when you see when they're going to the, you know, the BBC finds someone, a single mum who has to miss meals because she has to go to a food bank to feed her kids, and she's got arms like thighs. I mean, like, really? I think missing a few meals won't be a bad thing for you. I'm not saying that things aren't awful for the people of Gaza right now, but they're largely awful because the Hamas are in charge and not because of the IDF. It's as simple as that. And have you tried giving the hostages back and stopping bombing and trying to kill everyone in Israel? That might help your situation.
But Hamas don't care how many people die. They don't.
They actively want children in Gaza to die. They have stated this publicly. They are martyrs for the cause, and they get the media propaganda. But we have again, BBC interviews reporters, war reporters who know about wars. They've been on the ground talking about what is happening in Gaza as the most awful, unprecedented war zone ever. This is simply not true.
Well, and you know what more? It is utterly and completely, and I'll say it again, totally racist, right? There are wars going on today in which the situations are far worse. If you go to Sudan, if you saw what happened in Darfur, nobody who ever saw that could say with a straight face that what is occurring is on any scale equivalent. Yep. But we have and we hold a totally different standard for Israel. Why? Just tell me why. If someone can give me an answer why, I will stop going on about it. They can't, they won't. It's the question to which there is given.
And again, we've had that horrific terror attack in Colorado by a man, apparently a legal migrant, shouting "Free Palestine," and it was a rally. And again, it's described as a pro-Israel rally. No, it was a rally for the hostages. Surely we're all pro-freeing hostages, right? Oh, no, sorry, not the Israeli ones. Just find it, before we go to a break, I want to talk about Lord Hermer. He's the Attorney General in the news, I think every single time for the wrong reasons. He's in favour of the Chagos surrender. He's represented Caribbean countries wanting reparations. There is no issue that he has not been on the wrong side of. Human rights lawyer, big old mate of Keir Starmer, appointed to the job by his mate. Last week he did a speech at RUSI, the Royal United Services Institute, where he sort of laughingly likened, he didn't use the word Nazi, but he likened Tory and Reform politicians who have talked about leaving the European Convention on Human Rights to the Nazis. Well, this is what the lawyers in 1930s Germany wanted to do as well. I mean, absolute nonsense. He has apologised, still calls for him to resign. And now we know that he's also the man who authorised Lucy Connolly's prosecution for writing a tweet. At the same time, though, he declined to review unduly lenient sentences for a rapist and a paedophile. I mean, this man is on the wrong side of every item in history, isn't he?
Yeah, he's never found an enemy of this country that he doesn't quite really rather like, if I'm honest. But going back to the ECHR point, he says, oh no, we mustn't leave the ECHR, we must reform it. Well, over the weekend it was reported that 8 countries in Europe have made an official application to...
Nazis, the lot of them.
To review and to reform the ECHR. Now, Lord Hermer, Keir Starmer's hand-picked Attorney General, says we should be reforming the ECHR because then we can do it. And that's how you deal with it. Yeah. He says we accept there are problems, but we reform it. Are we one of the 8 countries to have asked? Have we tried?
Of course we're not.
No. And I'll tell you for why. It's because the likes of Keir Starmer, the likes of Lord Hermer, like the outcomes we get in which prisoners can vote and we can't deport anyone, and how many other horrendous circumstances have we seen because of our human rights laws? Jerry Adams, one of Lord Hermer's old clients, getting compensation from the British government. They like it, and they like having something to blame in the ECHR, and they are never, ever, ever going to change a thing because they like not just the process, but the outcomes.
But it was like the people who say we need to reform, and David Cameron, we need to reform the EU. Oh, good luck with that. How did that work out? And they didn't. They should have given him some sop, and then we wouldn't have had the Brexit vote realistically. But that was another foolish mistake on part of the EU. Can I just bring you also just quickly back to the conversation we had with a resident doctor? You used to call them junior doctors, Basha Mukherjee, BMA, basically saying doctors are worse off than they were 10 years ago. That's why we need these big pay rises. They're asking for 29%. The strike ballot is ongoing right now. But actually, the Nuffield Trust healthcare think tank has basically said, no, actually, you're using it. There are different ways of measuring inflation, and actually, doctors are better off. I'm very much of the view that we need to pay doctors enough to keep recruit and retain them. We need to train more doctors, stop importing them from abroad. We've got plenty of young, bright people who've got the grades at A level who want to be doctors, who we're literally not allowing to train to be doctors. Mad, it's insane. And again, it's a false. Oh, it costs 250 grand to train a doctor. It's a false economy not to train our own people up who will stay here. She was just saying though that basically it's not just about money. It's about people being valued, and the fact that staff are so overrun, and people can't get GP appointments. Do you think that the doctors are right to go on or to ballot for strike action?
Well, they have got literally everything they have asked for, and these have been ridiculous requests, and we now see that, and I really resent this actually, the public are with you, BMA. The public support you. The public
Less
are prepared.
than half the people, though, now.
Are prepared to back you enormously. There is enormous sympathy in this country for doctors. Why do you need to lie? Why do you need to over-egg the pudding? Why do you need to just push it that much too far?
Okay.
Look, I get that it's tough. I get that things have been overall slightly worse since 2008. But by the way, this country has got an awful lot poorer. And why are doctors moving overseas? Well, they're moving overseas to countries like Australia, to Canada, to the US. Why? Because overall, those countries are much wealthier than us.
Yeah.
Because
better quality of life.
Their politicians have pursued policies that have grown the economy. We are now poorest than the poorest state in the US, and we have got that way. And of course, we're going to get poorer.
But by the way, they want to defend the NHS, but then they go and move abroad to countries which have a completely different, they have an insurance-based system which works much, much better. But apparently it wouldn't work here. I've never really understood why that is the case, but there we are. 11:25 is the time. I'd love to hear from you on that as well. But get in touch in particular on whether you're concerned about Britain's ability to defend itself on the day the Strategic Defence Review has been, spoken about, officially published in a few hours. Also, by the way, in just a couple of moments, we are expecting a result in the verdict from the judge in the case of this is Hamit Choshkan. He's the man who burned a Quran. That result of that verdict is due any moment now. I'll bring you that as soon as we get it. This is Talk with a Home of Common Sense.
don't forget the woke DEI agenda in the armed forces as well. There's a great joke that goes around the United States where they say, you know, the easiest way to work out whether we're at serious risk of military intervention or a military escalation is when the ads for recruitment go from, you know, the DEI rainbow flags to just seeing young working class white blokes with guns saying come and fight for us, because then, you know, things are getting serious once again.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. 11:28 is the time. Let's get straight to your calls. 0344 499 1000. Herbie's on the line in Harrow. Herbie, you want to talk about defence. Are you concerned about our ability to defend ourselves, even after this announcement of from Keir Starmer?
Totally, Julia. I mean, say, where does this money come from? We haven't got the money. We haven't even got the time to do all this defencing. You know, they're talking about years building factories. In the meantime, you know, Russia seems to be flexing its muscles even more. And, you know, when they're siding up with China and Iran and all this, you know, what chance do we have? We have got no hope.
Well, wait a minute. Does Keir Starmer get any credit, and John Healey, the Defence Secretary, for the fact that, you know, we've known about these threats for a long time, and he's actually, you know, there's a load of money that people want, you know, Labour MPs want him to spend on, you know, more, I mean, throw more benefits at people who don't work as a general rule, or migrants, whatever, but actually spending money on stuff which, frankly, the Tories should have been spending money on the last few years. It's better late than never, surely.
Well, Julie, we've never learned from history, have we? When Germany flexed its muscles and started to strike, and it got World War II, do we ever learn? No, we don't, Julie. Not at all. They're blind to what's going on around the world. I'm sure they don't live in this world. They live in Clafuku land.
I mean, I have to say, I mean, they've had we're totally talking about ostriches, you know, heads in the sand, haven't we, in terms of the threats that are posed to us. Herbie, I really appreciate your call. Thank you very much indeed. Let's get some of your texts and tweets as well before we get to another call. Tracy's got in touch, said, of being concerned ever since that man took office. But I mean, come on, is it? I'm not concerned about Keir Starmer's willingness to actually, you know, defend our country in terms of military. Obviously not when it comes to the boats, but then the Tories didn't either. Nicholas says Starmer is more interested in posing for PR. He's the worst Prime Minister in this country's history. Seriously, get him out. Yasmin says Britain hasn't been defending itself for the last 14 years. Armed forces have been completely hollowed out by successive governments. Chris says we're not defending ourselves. Just look at our porous border. We're actively demonstrating that we are open to attack on a daily basis. Peter says, was there any single thing important to the Brits they didn't backtrack on? And Dan says, and I think there may be sarcasm in this message. No, because he posted a lovely video where he shook the hands of many military personnel, so obviously he cares about defending us. And Ian says, it will automatically hit 3%, this is 3% of GDP on defence, with higher wages and the cost of weapons rising with inflation. And Dal says, no country can go to war if it has no manufacturing base. We import so much of our food, engineering, energy. No matter how much you spend on defence, you can be cut off by your suppliers, and that's you done. Amen to that, Dal. Let's go to another phone call now. Tom is in Rugby. Tom, you wanted to have your say on junior doctors. We spoke to, resident doctors, there's no now. We spoke to one earlier who sort of denied that, you know, I think denied, it was all a bit haphazard, that conversation, that doctors aren't better off than they were 10 years ago, as a new think tank report suggests. What do you want to say?
Oh, Julia, honestly, I'm a retired consultant. I started work in 1974 as a junior doctor, but we were actually resident doctors. We lived in the hospital for about 2.5 years. I listened to that interview, and honestly, I almost wept into my cornflakes because of the victimhood that she was bleating on about. I love my job, worked hard, really enjoyed it. And doctors now, they're in a worse situation than us because of the actions of the BMA. They're now all working on rota systems, which are much less supporting, much more isolating. They have poorer support, poorer everything. But really, they are actually very well remunerated compared with the tuppence that we got back when I started.
Well, I mean, you retired as a consultant. Consultants have always done well. I mean, I know GPs had big pay rises under New Deals, under Labour, didn't they? But I certainly know, because my mum was a junior doctor when I was a kid. The hours, I mean, beyond duty for sort of 4 days straight, just literally trying to get a kip in a bunk, over for a few hours overnight. It's a really, really hard job. Are you saying it's harder now?
The very long hours of when we were junior doctors, they only lasted for a couple of years, and then you actually lived at home, you were resident. I think it's not harder, it's just very different. It's much less supportive. But even so, being a doctor is a fantastic career. And I just think that the medical ethics seems to have vanished. This girl bleating on about, how poor, how difficult it was, blah, blah, blah. I loved my job, and I loved caring for people. And if that's gone from the medical ethic, then
it is a worry. And again, a lot of people working 3 days a week. I certainly remember my mum. She had to be dragged, literally kicking and screaming, out of her GP surgery. She wanted to carry on. I think, she was doing more hours than most people work full-time, working part-time when she was retired. A lot of people feel that way. Tom, thank you very much. More doctors like Tom, please. 11:33 is the time. Up next, we're going to be talking to George Pascoe Watson about where we are politically. And we are expecting to get the result of a verdict of the case of Hamid Choskan. He's the man who was on trial for burning a Quran. Do we or do we not have blasphemy laws in this country? We'll find out soon. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Welcome back to the show. It's just coming up to 11:36. Very much appreciate joining me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. Sam Armstrong still with me. Delighted to be joined now by George Pascoe Watson, former political editor of The Sun, and he joins us to talk about, all things political. A very good morning to you, George.
Morning, Julia. Hi, Sam.
Big day today in terms of the Strategic Defence Review. Huge sums of money, lots just sort of stuff that prime ministers, as you know, love. And you spent many years following PMs around doing this stuff. They love posing in front of the flags and big equipment and shaking hands with military people. Almost across the board, political parties, from the Green Party to Reform, are agreeing on that we need to spend more money on defence. But from your knowledge over the years, and I know you spent a lot of time with military, you were embedded with forces and things, Iraq war and that. Is what he's announcing today, is that enough money? And are we actually going to have safe borders?
think the number one question is, can you ever spend enough money on defence? And in this country, in this world, I'm actually pleased and applaud Keir Starmer and John Healey for taking these steps. The second thing is, if you're in the defence industry in Britain, you are absolutely celebrating, because this is phenomenal news for sales and for Britain's position in the world, because when we sell military equipment around the world, we also have greater power. We know how that military system works, and that is critical, particularly in the new age of space age defense technology. So it's a very good thing on the face of it. Obviously, making sure that it's not just an ambition but an actual commitment is seriously important. 12 new submarines is huge news, and will employ many very skilled engineers up and down the country, particularly in Scotland. So you have to think about the Scottish politics there as well. The later Prime Minister looking after Scottish workers is very important in the battle with the SNP. Is it ever going to be enough? I don't think you can ever be complacent about defence. As we know, security is the number one priority of any government. So in a day that we could be watching a Prime Minister turning his head and looking away from defence, I'm pleased that he's doing it. It's the right thing to do. But one of the questions we haven't discussed in the media recently is the importance of increasing the number of men and women serving in the
Well, indeed, and it was a question I put actually to Defence Minister Alistair Cairns about, the actual numbers we've got. We're down to 70,000. It's supposed to be 73, but even that doesn't touch the size of the forces we would actually need in the event of not just defending ourselves, but being able to put peacekeeping forces, if there ever came to it, in Ukraine, or defending the Baltic states or any other of our NATO allies.
And there's a real danger of running away with the idea that technology replaces humans in military, and that's just not true. You speak to anybody in the military senior, and they make the point that if you take land, you have to hold land. There have to be logistical supports. There has to be everybody from the catering people to the science people, the health people, everybody. And it needs human beings, not just smart weapons. So that's a really big debate. And as a society, are we prepared for that? Do young men and women, are they interested in joining our services? It looks like the recruitment numbers are dwindling. And what are we doing?
I'm not surprised, though. The adverts in recent years, and I've noticed they have changed in the last 6 months or so, but the adverts were all like, oh, we need people with mental health problems. Come and be trans in the military. It's like, no, come and get a career, come and fight for your country, come and be proud of what you're doing every day. Those are the sort of young people we want. But we know the surveys showing, and the same for America, something like 40% only of youngsters in this country would be willing to fight for their country. That's damning.
You have to ask why that is. Our young people are very, very intelligent people in today's world. They're weighing up their possibilities, weighing up their opportunities, and they're saying, what is the future? Also, don't forget that in my generation, certainly, I wouldn't class you in mine, Julia.
I hate to tell you, you know perfectly well we're the same generation.
But in my generation, I come from a family. My father served in the Royal Air Force. He was a Spitfire pilot. There are links in my generation to people who have been in the military, and those links have been dying for generations. And so it's not so much in the culture anymore. And so it's quite a job for any government, whether it's Labour, Conservative, whoever, to try and encourage the young people to think of a real career in the military.
A career is one thing, but your country being under attack. I'm not talking about going off and fighting, someone would say foreign overseas wars, fighting the idea that people wouldn't think that they would fight to defend their own country, I think is absolutely terrifying. But again, if you tell people, particularly young people, their country's terrible, there's nothing worth standing up for, no values, then what a surprise. Let's talk also about protecting our other borders. Again, a question I put to Alistair Cairns, the Defence Minister, about are we confident we can actually protect our borders from an invasion fighting force when we can't protect it from young men without passports, let alone rifles, turning up on our shores on dinghies. We've now got a prediction of some 50,000 illegal migrants coming on boats alone, still coming through on lorries as well, by the way. Other people, huge number of people, tens of thousands overstaying visas and then claiming asylum, having arrived here legally. But this comes after 1,194 people crossed on Saturday alone as the French police stood around with their video cameras and their gauloises. Can we protect our borders?
It looks increasingly impossible for this government or any government to actually stop this happening. Your point about the trucks is very important. The trucks has been going 10, 15, 20 years. And because they weren't very visible to the media, that carried on in the background and hasn't really caused anybody so much political aggro. The boats are visible. That Saturday, of course, was still in May. We're now into June. We've got the whole of July, August and September to come with great weather. We see a heat wave coming to Britain, apparently, the weather been says.
Oh, yay, really? Oh,
yes,
good.
That's one upside.
There's a trade-off, isn't there? Heat wave, channel migrants.
Well, so obviously, politically, this is a real headache for Keir Starmer, who has actually said we will stop the boats. And of course, unless you are prepared to take further action and talk about the HCR, then you can't really do it. And as you say, it is quite formidable to watch French guards, French police on the beaches taking videos, watching, but not taking any steps to prevent these young men, and it is mainly young men, from getting on board these dinghies.
It is extraordinary, isn't it? Let's also talk about what's going on in the heart of government, because we know, I mean, I have to say, I think John Healey is very much seeing him, the Defence Secretary himself, as a future leader. Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, a popular figure with many, apart from the actual Labour Party, interestingly. But there's no doubt at all Keir Starmer is facing a lot of grief over not just what his Chancellor does, Rachel Reeves, in terms of the purse strings and dealing with benefits and like, but also over his Attorney General, Lord Hermer. He's a man I think pretty much no one outside of the dinner parties of Islington had actually heard of, big human rights lawyer. It turns out, I mean, in a speech to RUSI last week, the Royal United Service Institute thought it was a good idea to basically compare people who wanted us to leave the European Convention on Human Rights, say Reform and Tory politicians, to Nazis, comparing them to lawyers on behalf of basically, Hitler in the 1930s wanting to leave sort of rule-based law. He also authorised Lucy Connolly's prosecution for a tweet and that 31-month sentence she's still serving. At the same time, he declined to review, as Lord Attorney General, unduly lenient sentences for a rapist and a paedophile. Does he have to go?
There's increasing pressure on Keir Starmer to deal with his Attorney General, and I think probably for the political reason that he's going to attract more and more negative headlines. That's the difficulty for a Prime Minister. It may not be that the person is bad at their job or has transgressed in some way, that they become a political difficulty. When you have an Attorney General whose guilt is on foot-in-mouth disease, which is becoming the problem, then they become quite difficult to manage. And you need to support that person, because our former colleagues, the political journalists, on a daily basis are asking the Prime Minister's official spokesperson, does the Prime Minister have faith in the Attorney General? Yeah. The answer has to be yes. It can't be anything other than yes. And as long as that goes on and Labour MPs are beginning to ask questions about his political ability, then it's a challenge. The point here is that Lord Hermer is a lawyer, a very distinguished lawyer. The fact is, all lawyers have to take on cases which they wouldn't necessarily support in private life. But here is a man who has actually expressed his political views during his career. Yeah. And it seems like there's a perception that he is playing politics with the law. Now, I'm not saying that, but certainly colleagues of his own law. Lord Glassman has said that, a Labour MP, a Labour peer. So it's an impression thing, and in politics, as we know, perception is 9/10 of the law. And it gets in the way of doing the job.
I mean, not only is he, Keir Starmer's big mate. I mean, he's part of the key advice over the Chagos Island surrender. He's given advice, and again, this would be his choice. He's not having to do this. Gives choice to Caribbean countries wanting slavery reparations from Britain. He represented Jerry Adams against the BBC. Shamima Begum, wanting her rights to try and come back here. Also numerous ISIS and Al-Qaeda operatives as well, and activists. I mean, he doesn't off-pick them. I mean, it seems to me that, he makes interesting choices. Just finally, I do want to ask you about more homegrown stuff. People pay their local, council tax, and we've seen council tax go, 5% pretty much for everybody, if not more in some places. The new leaders of reform of the Kent Council county council. They say, no, we are going to be going in and we're going to be installing our own version of DOGE, Department of Government Efficiency, that Elon Musk was leading until last week at the White House in America. And we are going to go in and we are going to, having won a load of council seats, basically find where the savings can be found. Do you think they'll actually make big savings? And if they do, will that actually be quite a game changer in British politics?
Let's hope so. You can only celebrate the forensic accountancy that is being put in place in Kent, or any council, or any government for that matter. Anything that uses taxpayers' money, it's your money, it's my money, it's our viewers' money, and it's real money, and it's very, very important that there's a real check kept on it. So let's hope they can find some efficiency and make sure that that becomes the watchword of any government.
I mean, every government goes into power and says, we're going to deal with this and make savings. They never do, but I'm sure you or I, anyone working in the private sector, could find savings like that. George Pascoe Watson, always good to talk to you. Thank you so much. 11:47 is the time. Up next, going to talk to Sharon Davies about the latest, changes in terms of who can play in women's football under the FA since Sunday, and plenty other more stories as well. And by the way, it's just women in women's football now. I know, it's an outrage. That's up next. This is Talk.
I will give the Labor government some sympathy here in that nothing's been done for 30 years. We had this mentality at the end of the Cold War that basically said, this is the end of history, everyone's going to play nice from this point on. And so as a result of that, we have done next to nothing. And so many other global economies, by the way, as well. So now, when nuclear submarines take years and years to build, I'd be surprised if these go into the water before 2040. It feels like too little too late to me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. My next guest is someone who's always talked common sense. Oh, yeah, now the Supreme Court agrees with her. That's good, eh? Sharon Davies, Olympic medalist swimmer, author of the brilliant book, Unfair Play, The Battle for Women's Sport. A very, very good morning to you.
Good morning, Julia. It's we're getting there, aren't we? Slowly. It's just like pulling teeth.
It really is.
It should just be sorted so quickly and so easily by just saying women's sport is for biological women.
You fascist! You fascist, how dare you say something so awful. Elizabeth, I have to correct some of the copyrights in. I get headlines all the time like, trans women banned from women's sport. No, men are banned from women's sport. Men can play in men's sport. Now, this is the Football Association in England, and they instigated a rule that you had to be a biological woman to be a woman to play in women's football at pretty much all levels, really. And it came into force from Sunday. This is a great thing. We're all in favour of this. Scottish FA announced they're banning trans women, again, trans-identifying men. Let's call it what it is. But, I mean, it's amazing. The BBC did a report on this. Their first report, picture of a young man who claims he's transitioned. I don't know what that means, 4 years ago, and who's helped his team to win one of the tournaments. You think, well, of course you have. It's because you've got a bloke playing on your team. But the focus, of course, was on the male players who apparently now can't play, even though, of course, they could go and play with the other men, rather than on the women whose safety and whose rights to a fair match have been protected.
Yeah, and this is what I find so upsetting constantly, is that we are talking about women's sport, and yet we're highlighting and centering men in women's sport all the time. You know, and the BBC are supposed to be impartial, and yet they will constantly do the sob story. They're not talking to the women that have had serious knee injuries, that have been, you know, come off the football pitch with covered in bruises, that are losing their place on the team. So, you know me, I love to talk facts. There are 4,000 football clubs here in the UK. Only 10% of those have a women's team. There are 92 professional men's clubs. There are 12 women's clubs. So there are plenty of places for men that are non-conforming men, but are men, to play with other men. And there are also mixed teams that they can play on as well if they choose to, where everyone consents to the fact that, you know, as a woman, if you're on that team, you're going to be at a disadvantage, but you've decided to do that. So what we're saying is that women's sport should be for women. 4% of the sponsorship dollar across the world goes to women. 51% of the world is women. We get a tiny slice of the sports.
Can we just keep the tiny bit we've got for us?
Exactly. Can we please just keep this tiny little bit that we've been working so hard on to try and grow and develop and get girls involved in sport? Can we just keep this for us? Because we know there's a difference. You know, ask anybody, why is there men and women's sport if there is no difference? And we know exactly why there's men and women's sport. So to turn around and pretend that all of a sudden it doesn't matter, and the fact that women are just not centred in their own sport, I find really heartbreaking. That, you know, the BBC can constantly go off on this tangent of the poor man who can't play in the women's team.
I know, and they're focused on, they named the man who lives as if he is a woman but is a man. Again, I don't know what living as a woman means. I don't know what that means these days.
Growing your hair and putting a skirt on.
Yeah, apparently, yeah, exactly. But they had an unnamed female player who said that she represented everyone else on the team, and they were quite happy with the decision that he couldn't play anymore. But she didn't want to give her name in fear of reprisals, and that tells you everything.
That's the problem. People are petrified to speak out. You know they are. You know, and I have people speaking to me every day. It's getting better. And I constantly say to parents who come on the phone to me, please just try to organise together, you know, because if you say, if all the girls say, we're not doing this anymore, we're not going to play you, this is unfair, en masse, we want to listen to our voice, they're not going to be able to do it.
Exactly, and we've had that in various sports where that has happened, haven't they? Can I move on? Because there are a few other things I want to talk about. I mean, it's very obvious in some sports why men would be a risk to women. A lot of people weren't aware of that in football. And again, you have to see the injuries, how many
50%
girls...
50% harder men kick than women.
Exactly, it's rather obvious.
And they jump, you know, a lot of the trans-identifying men were playing in goals. Of course, we're being bigger with bigger hands. Of course, explosive made a huge difference, right?
Imagine. Well, we know the obvious difference, though, is when boxing. And the obscenity at the last Olympics of watching two men punching women in the face. One woman literally going, I'm putting my gloves up. It's not worth the risk, and my chances of being permanently hurt. Imaine Khalif was the Algerian boxer who won a gold medal. But the sex test results from the 2023 World Championships have finally been published for the first time, indicating, oh, what a surprise, as you can just see from looking at him, that he is biologically male. Now, a lot of the controversy of this was that, well, he wasn't trans, but he was sort of intersex, or that he had been raised as a girl, even though, and some confusion early on. But this is incontrovertible. He's a man.
Yeah, biologically male, always biologically male, and has known that he's biologically male. He would have gone through full male puberty. So we have quite a big issue in sport. We obviously have the trans inclusion. So these are men who are choosing to identify as the opposite sex, but aren't. And then we have a particular problem with the DSD called 5ARD. Now, this is a DSD that's particularly prevalent in Africa. And so it affects only men. It means that when they're born, that their male genitalia has not been developed properly. Some of it is often internal, but they are male and they produce male levels of testosterone. Yeah. But because they are picked up and they can't see male anatomy, they go, oh, you must be a little girl, and they put an F on their birth certificate. Yeah. But they're not biologically female, they're biologically male. And if they've been born in the West, they would have had a blood test and that would have been sorted out very, very quickly. Yeah. Now, they've been hunted out deliberately to be involved in women's sport, particularly in places like track and field and football, and obviously now we can see in boxing. And everyone knows, because they will go through male puberty, so they've known, the same as Caster Semenya. Caster Semenya was given a sex test when they were 18 years old. They've known since they were 18 that they were biologically male. I mean, Caster has this incredible line that says, my testes don't make me any more of a female than any other female. Well, I think they do. I think that's the whole point
male.
of it,
but again, I think you said...
It's just what a ridiculous lie.
Yeah, you said they. It's called he. He's a he. Let me also talk about a 16-year-old. And again, this is what I find obscene, is it's kids doing this. 16-year-old trans athlete known as A.B. Hernandez. And this is classic. Was born a boy, but has transitioned and now competes against girls. No, A.B. Hernandez is a boy. And he is the focus of a massive row in California as he won 2 golds and a silver at the California High School Track and Field Championships. Yeah. Lots of people protesting. He was included in the girls category in the high jump, the long jump and the triple jump. Became a national conversation. Now, of course, we had President Trump. He'd called for him to be barred from competing. Now, he is allowed to compete, but only against other males. But they allowed him to compete as an extra student. It meant there were 2 winners. So when he got first, he came joint first with other women, with girls. This is insane.
Yeah, this is really bad, isn't it? This is them turning around and acknowledging that they know it's cheating. And now what we're going to do as a consolation prize is the girls that were beaten a medal as well. So, I mean, that's what's so ridiculous with all of this, is at the end of the day, these people are biologically still male. They will always remain male. They will have a physical benefit that will never be able to be removed. So therefore, they need to be able to compete with other males. And as I've already explained, they have a lot more opportunity to compete with other males than females do, because there's a lot more choice of competition and a lot more opportunities out there for those that are people that are male. And yet women are just treated as if we're some sort of support group, and that's that's the problem, isn't
it?
Absolutely.
I think we've always had a word for this. We've always had a word for this, Sharon. That word is called cheating. Sharon Davies, you've been brilliant on this. Thank you so much for joining us, as always. Sam Armstrong. This is still so infuriating that it's still happening and it's still being reported in a dishonest way.
Yeah, and let's not forget there were real victims of this. Yeah. One that I helped to represent at the Free Speech Union was Kerris Vaughan. She was a 17-year-old autistic girl whose real passion was to go and play football for her local side. She was faced against a team that was fielding three men against her. A good part of the supposedly small number of players that are playing in the league. She asked the referee, is that man a man playing against us? For that, she was banned from playing for 6 games. Her team was struck down with points. She endured a year-long ordeal over that.
Asking a perfectly reasonable question, and the answer to the question was actually yes. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Up next, going to talk to the former head of the British Army. That's Lord Dannatt. Don't go away.
Good evening and welcome to Plank of the Week.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
A very good afternoon to you. Welcome to the show. Well, welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense. And whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, thank you so much for joining me. Also still with me is commentator Sam Armstrong. And coming up in this hour, just a couple of moments, we're going to be talking to Lord Dannatt. He's the former head of the British Army. This as Labour stands accused of backtracking on a commitment to spend 3% of GDP on defence by 2034. It's currently just 2.3%. We're told it's going to go up to 2.5%. But a few days ago, the Defence Secretary John Healey talked about how he would absolutely certain that this would happen, and then he downgraded it to an ambition. Certainly the word that the Prime Minister's repeatedly used. He this morning was announcing the long-awaited Strategic Defence Review. It sets out the UK's 10-year defence plan. The actual review will be published this afternoon after the Defence Secretary stands up, well, as he stands up in the Commons. But Keir Starmer set out Britain's aim to build up to 12 nuclear-powered attack submarines, pledged £15 billion in the UK's nuclear warhead programme, and to construct at least 6 new arms plants. But is that going to be enough? And how can we defend our country? Well, we can't even defend our borders. Britain is on course to have up to 50,000 migrant crossings arrive in this country this year. This is after almost 1,200 boat arrivals came on Saturday alone. Plus, we're going to be talking about the government's disposable vape ban, which came into effect yesterday. Could it backfire and lead people to return to smoking? We'll talk about that with Chris Snowden from the Institute of Economic Affairs. Right now, let's go straight to my first guest this hour, former head of the British Army, Lord Dannatt, who joins us to talk about the Strategic Defence Review. A very good afternoon to you, sir.
Hello, Julia. Good afternoon to you and your viewers.
Thank you so much indeed for joining us. Well, you've heard a lot of the details. To be honest, a lot of it was dribbled out in the media before we actually had the Prime Minister standing up today in Glasgow announcing some more of the details, more this afternoon. No doubt there'll be quite a lot in the small print, but in terms of what the government has laid out, I just went through some of it. Is it enough to be able to defend our country?
Well, there are 62 recommendations in this Strategic Defence Review. And I think the premise of the policy aspects of it are pretty good. But success or failure is going to be completely determined by whether it can be funded. Yes, we know this government is committed to raising to 2.5% of GDP by 2027. But now we're only hearing that we're going to go to 3%, possibly not any earlier than 2034. Julia, that's a little bit like in 1937 saying to Adolf Hitler, please don't attack us until 1946 because we won't be ready.
That is quite an analogy. Do you believe that the threat to us, to our NATO allies, that we are legally bound to protect, is so great as the threat that was posed in the 1930s to Europe?
Well, the big difference between now and then is that we are a member state of NATO and we're all bound by Article 5, which, as we all know, is an attack on one member, is an attack on all. So let's just put this in the context of where we are today. We have an aggressive neighbour, Vladimir Putin's Russia, and he's fighting that very bloody war, and the Ukrainians are doing fantastically. But let's just think that if there is a ceasefire in Ukraine, say in a few months' time, by most people's calculation, the Russians, about 2 years after that, will have replenished and refurbished their armed forces. But if they wanted to test the strength of Article 5, they'd be in a position to make a probing attack, say, on one of the Baltic states. And that would really test whether United Kingdom, United States, other European countries are willing to stand together against further aggression from Russia. So we have to take this threat seriously. We have to take the recommendations of this defence review seriously. And the government, the Chancellor and the Prime Minister have got to think really hard about funding it and funding it properly and doing so soon.
And especially in the context, we've got the Defence Secretary of the US, Pete Hegseth, echoing actually what a lot of people's concerns are in terms of China's ambitions in Taiwan. And again, like Vladimir Putin, they've said the quiet bit out loud. They intend to take Taiwan back in whatever way necessary. But talking about a threat to Taiwan being imminent. Now, a lot of people might think, well, what's that got to do with us, the other side of the world? Of course, that trade routes, the economy, world economic collapse as a result of that. But also, crucially, America focused on that side of the world, won't be focused on Europe and puts more on us and our European allies to defend ourselves.
Well, Julia, that's exactly the point. And I think Pete Hegseth was very clear at the summit in the Far East quite recently, that the Indo-Pacific area and the rising threat from China is the United States' primary focus. Now, the big thing for us here in Europe is two things. One is to make sure that we step up our spending and our defence capability so that we can properly look after ourselves in Europe. And secondly, we've got to make sure that we keep the United States bound into NATO, bound in to that Article 5 commitment in some shape or form. If the Americans are going to do less, and they will do less in Europe, then we Europeans have got to do more. That's the top line and the bottom line. And this defence review spells it out very clearly. But it comes down to funding at the end of the day. 2.5% is not enough. 3% by 2034 is not enough. We've got to have 3% by the end of this Parliament, 2029, and probably a debate about going to 3.5% by 2034. Those are the figures that the NATO summit is going to demand in a week or two's time.
I mean, exactly. We've got a lot of big defence events coming up in the next few weeks and months. Certainly states that have a border with Russia are now looking at 5% of spending. So Poles, the Baltic states are spending more. They're very much going up to that. Can I ask you, though, in terms of Vladimir Putin wanting to sort of make a foray into the Baltic states, because he shares a border with the Baltic states, but why would he? A lot of people be saying, but why would he? Why we got this threat in Ukraine, but why would he want to try and take the Baltic states when he would know that they are protected by that NATO umbrella?
Well, of course, that's a really good question, and it's one of the major geostrategic unknowns. What would Vladimir Putin do? But what we do know from all that he's said and written and done so far is that he has this undiminished ambition to restore Greater Russia. As we all know, he wants to absorb Ukraine back into Russia, and he looks at countries like the Baltic states, like Finland and other states that were part of the Soviet Union in the past, and he would love to reabsorb some of those. But most particularly, I think, by probing at NATO, he'll be probing the strength of Article 5, because I think he would love nothing else more than to see the cohesion of the West and the cohesion of NATO that defeated the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact in 1989-90, to see that melt away. And then he would feel that he really can exert the influence that he wants to grow Russia's significance and Russia's power.
I remember so much the reporting around and comments by politicians about the efforts they made against Vladimir Putin after he invaded Ukraine, and the economic sanctions and the unity that was shown eventually on that issue. And then more patting themselves on the back saying, Vladimir Putin didn't expect us to unite and defend Ukraine. And I always thought that was not a success, that was a failure. If Vladimir Putin had really believed that the West would ally themselves strongly to Ukraine, he probably wouldn't have invaded in the first place. How do we convince Vladimir Putin, or indeed Xi Jinping of China, that the West is united and not just able to fight and defend our allies, but willing as well? Because there are some big question marks about the willingness of some leaders, but also the willingness of even our own fellow countrymen and women to defend our own country, let alone an ally.
Well, you've raised some big issues there, but on that last point, our government has got to be absolutely clear that there are threats to our security, and they have got to make sufficient funds and capability available to deter further aggression. And here's the critical bit: they've got to speak with one united voice to the people of this country and say, we've got to get serious about our own security, not just the threat from Russia, which is manifest and in many ways is ongoing even now, particularly with cyber attacks and other such deniable events, but also just trying to protect our own borders from the huge number of migrants that are coming across the channel. I mean, there are many threats to our security, and our government's got to speak with one strong voice to persuade the people of this country that the government is serious, they're taking a lead, they're going to provide properly for our security so that we can get on and live our lives peacefully, and actually then do things like grow the economy and all the other things the government wants to do, spend more on other priorities. But first and foremost, we've got to get our security. We've got to be strong at home and strong abroad, as the government keeps saying, but they've got to mean it and they've got to say it.
And you mentioned the economy a number of times. This is about the Treasury purse strings. Every Defence Secretary has left office and gone, I wanted to spend a lot more, I want to do. Every ex-Chief of Staff has done an interview saying they wanted to spend more, they couldn't get that funding. Is the problem in the Treasury, you can't get the money? And is that bean counters or politicians who simply don't accept the reality of the threat?
I think it's the issue of priorities. The Prime Minister, I think, is increasingly clear that the defence of this country and our security is a high priority. But within the Treasury, there are so many other pressures, whether it's to do with the National Health Service, whether it's to do with care, whether it's to do with schools, other aspects of national infrastructure, that they just can't bring themselves to say, yes, OK, these things are important, but what is the most important is to spend more on our defence. Yeah. That's what's got to go home. That penny has got to drop. Or not that penny, those billions of pounds have got to drop in the Treasury to understand that this is the rock of our society.
Well, we've got a load of, nuclear-powered subs. We'll be, no doubt, building jets and goodness knows what. What about the actual number of fighting men and women who are there on the ground? Because the number of people who've made forces, people who've been our guests are pointing out, it's all very well, you can take territory, but you can't hold territory without men on the ground. And goodness me, we've seen that very, very, very clearly in Ukraine. I would say also in Gaza as well in recent years. We've got a fighting force that's supposed to be 73,000, but it's actually only 70,000. We've got a problem with retention, recruitment, boosting pay and the living conditions, obviously a factor, although that doesn't in itself mean that we're more able to defend ourselves. How many men and women fighting forces should we actually have if we want to, be able to seriously know that we can protect ourselves?
Well, numbers are important, but at this moment in time, I think what is more important is that we've got the right equipment, the right leadership and the right training. And the equipment bit is the expensive bit. Once we're properly equipping the 75,000 or so, which is the figure that the current government, roughly that figure, wants to get the army back to. Once we've got that size force, properly equipped and organised and trained and well led, and we've got great leadership within our armed forces, then we can think about expanding it. I think what we will see in the detail of this defence review are some measures about increasing our reserves, our Army Reserve, Navy Reserve, Air Force Reserve, but particularly our Army Reserve, and maybe also this idea of some kind of third force or home service force to protect key installations and parts of our national infrastructure. I think that's all good, but the most important thing is to sort out the equipment to make sure that the soldiers, sailors, airmen and Marines we've got are properly equipped to do the job we're currently asking of them.
Yeah, goodness, I remember covering as political editor in the Iraq War, Afghanistan War, and so much the conversation was about the lack of even decent flak jackets for our serving men and women.
Well, don't tell me about that, Julia. I was the army chief during both those campaigns, and my head got very sore banging it against the brick wall of number 10 and number 11.
This is basic stuff. We do seem to struggle in this country, or is this what happens everywhere with procurement, with getting the right stuff at the right price, at the price we'd originally negotiated, to the right quality and getting it quickly? An awful lot of money is going to be spent on, nuclear-powered submarines, this and that. But are we actually going to pay, a reasonable price and get it when we need it? Because we seem to have a uniquely poor record on this in this country.
No, you make a good point there. I mean, yes, we've got to spend more, but we've got to spend better. The history of our defence procurement has been pretty woeful in the past. So we've got to have better project management. We've got to make sure that when we've stated a requirement, we've let it out to industry, that the conduct of delivering on that contract is well policed and is well done to time and to cost. And that requires some discipline from the user, not to change the requirement halfway through a contract. Because when we do that, that brings in more costs and it brings in delay. So discipline is required on both sides.
Yeah, absolutely. Just finally, before I let you go, Lord Dannatt, look, we're going to have the Defence Secretary making a statement later. We've had the Prime Minister giving a speech today, and we've seen, incredible agreement from, Greens and Lib Dems, Labour, Tories, Reform Party. We need to spend more money on defence. We need to make our country safe and be able to protect our allies. What would you say if you had the Prime Minister? Foolishly, he doesn't listen to my show, I'm pretty sure, but if he was listening to my show, he'd probably know a lot more. What message would you send to the Prime Minister right now as a man who has been in the position of, being the head of the British Army? What would you tell him?
What I'd say to him is, Prime Minister, look back to Tony Blair, your predecessor, his defence review of 97-98. It was great policy work, just like your defence review would look as if it's going to be. But it failed because the Chancellor of the day, Gordon Brown, refused to fully fund it. And if you let Rachel Reeves refuse to fully fund this defence review, then frankly, you're going to go down in the bad boys column of history and not do and argue for what we absolutely need in the best interests of this country. Look back at history, learn the lesson, and get it right this time, Prime Minister.
Lord Dannatt, former head of the British Army, so appreciate you taking the time to talk to us. Thank you very much indeed. Sam Armstrong is a Conservative commentator joining us in the studio. You know, he knows what he's talking about. Indeed, we had the Defence Minister on earlier. We've had a number of people who fought. I mean, again, we're armchair generals, you know. We talk a good game, but we've not actually been there. These men have all been there. It's very interesting when he talked about, I mean, the analogy with saying to Hitler in 1937, would you mind not invading anywhere till 1946 just so we can have time to build up our forces? That's the reality where we are.
Yeah, and let's be clear, weakness doesn't get you peace, right? That's the problem with what the likes of Jeremy Corbyn
softly, carry a big stick.
Everyone speaks. If you make it scary to invade you, people won't do it. And that is the reality. We have allowed our defences to look too soft to the likes of Vladimir Putin, President Xi, and all of that makes the world a more dangerous place.
But it's not just on offences. We have got nuclear weapons. Again, do you think Keir Starmer would press the nuclear button? I mean, if you won't, you shouldn't be Prime Minister, in my view. But I think a lot of it's more about willingness than ability.
Completely and utterly agree with you. And look, the front line is not, thankfully, mercifully, on our shores yet. But I'll tell you where it is. It's on the Taiwan Straits. Yep. And China is every day looking towards Taiwan. It's made it very clear that it intends to invade it.
They do 4 rehearsals a year. They won't even know which is the real one because they rehearse 4 times a year to invade Taiwan. But no, nothing to see here. Absolutely not a threat.
And if you think the Ukraine war turned our economy upside down, if you think it made us all poorer, and boy did it, those big massive gas bills that everyone listening to this paid for the last 2 years are in part a result of that. You haven't seen anything yet, because when Taiwan is struck, and I think it is a when, if the West is not prepared, able and willing to defend it, to keep that economy going, everything is going to stop working.
Well, we are talking about even just down to things just like, the Indo-Pacific, a massive trading route. The production of semiconductors, the highest grade semiconductors, I think 90% of them are made in Taiwan.
One company in
Taiwan. And I know they're trying to sort of get things set up in America. Apparently, the expertise and how these factories have to be built is so precise. I mean, it's just so precise. It's whether we're even going to be able to do it. There are loads of things that basically Taiwan is the only country that's pretty much providing for the world. Here's the other thing. It was mentioned earlier by cyber attacks, but also energy attacks. The ability to simply cut a cable under the North Sea and cuts us off from extra electricity from Norway. I mean, you think the Russians won't do that? They don't have to invade us. They can turn everything off here by simply slicing through a cable, for God's sake.
They're doing it already, Julie. We know they've done it up in the Baltic Sea. We know that they've been looking at our cables. This country is a grave and imminent threat.
Yeah, I'm always amazed at people who don't get that. Also, here's the thing. You can, let's face it, technical term, pussyfoot around. 2.3% GDP, 2.5%, 3%. We'll be spending 8% of GDP when we have to go to war to protect our NATO allies. It's going to cost, but it's going to cost more then because we're going to have to work really quickly. It is cheaper for us to do it all now.
Yeah,
than it is to do it. Try and do it in a few years' time.
Given how much we've destroyed our own country's capacity to produce anything, that includes food, that includes steel, that includes basic goods. We are so reliant on the
energy.
If you think that we are going to be able to run the kind of economy, to live the kind of lives that we do when that kind of war is happening, you have got another thing coming. This country is so dependent. There'll be rationing and everything back in if it happens.
Happy Monday, everybody. I'm glad you're tuned in now, aren't you? But it's true. People need to be talking about it. Sam Armstrong, always good to get you on all these things. 12:21 is the time. I'm going to take a quick break. We're going to get to your calls coming in thick and fast. This is Talk Over Common Sense.
And I will give the Labor government some sympathy here in that nothing's been done for 30 years. We had this mentality at the end of the Cold War that basically said, you know, this is the end of history, everyone's going to play nice from this point on. And so as a result of that, we have done next to nothing. And so have so many other global economies, by the way, as well. So now, when nuclear submarines take years and years to build, I'd be surprised if these go into the water before 2040. You know, it feels like too little, too late to me.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk. Welcome back to the show. Welcome back to Happy Monday show. We're going to be at war. Everything's awful. I mean, that's a fair summary of the last half hour, isn't it? Anyway, great to have your company. We could cheer you up from now on. Lots of calls coming in on 0344 499 1000. You can text the word Talk in your message to 87222 as well. Message us on X at talkTV. Have to say this bit. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Let's go to James, who's in Norwich. And James, you want to talk about this big defence announcement, don't you?
Hi, Julia. Thanks for
morning.
having me on.
Thanks for calling.
No, but I'm a first-time caller, long-term listener. Really appreciate everything you do, and you do really bring common sense to the argument. I feel I've got a different perspective on the whole rearmament that Keir Starmer is now spouting. I think it's actually because he promised that he wouldn't put our taxes up again after Rachel Reeves' budget.
Yeah.
And I feel that he's going to go on about the rearmament, etc., etc., and then he's going to, look to put our taxes back up because he's going to make everyone scared. And this was unforeseen. We didn't know it was happening, etc., etc., etc. And then he's now got an excuse to more heavily tax us.
I have to say, I mean, again, although they're taking money out of the foreign aid budget, which I think is a good thing, that's been an absurd sum of money for many, many years, but I can't really see how we can properly rearm and recruit unless there is more spent, and I don't know where else that money comes from.
Yeah, of course, it's just.
Would that be a problem for you?
Absolutely. I mean, he's literally taxing us every which way. I had someone who worked for me. I had to let them go before Keir came in because I was too worried that I was never going to be able to get rid of anyone.
Interesting.
After he came in.
The workers' rights thing. Again, everyone says workers' rights are great. Workers' rights, as we know, like France got very strong workers' rights. And basically people don't employ people after 49 people in their company because they would never be able to ever get rid of them.
Yes, and he's got so many other things. The renters' rights bill, he's crucifying landlords. He's just stinging everyone in every which way. And now he's talking about taxing ISAs and savers. And
they're going to tax everything. Here's the thing, though. If we need the money to be spent, I mean, I'm all in favour of us cutting a load of other things first, absolutely. I mean, I would slash that benefits bill, and I'd do it overnight. I really would. People will work. A lot of those people will work when they're hungry enough. But if they need the money to defend our country, defend our allies with these multiple threats, and, whatever politicians say, Lord Dannatt, he knows what he's talking about. He says the threat is real and it's imminent. Wouldn't it be a good thing that we built up our defences? And if that means paying more tax, that means paying more tax.
I completely agree. One last thing I would say is, rather than putting numbers on budgets like the defence and things like that, why don't we split the economy, how much we make, into percentages? So you could say 5% on defence, you could say 30% on benefits, and that 30% grows when the economy grows.
That's an interesting way of doing it. I'd be intrigued by that.
At the moment, they're spending 130% of what we earn.
Oh, yes. Oh, they are. James, thank you so much. I hope you carry on listening. I hope you'll call in again as well. Very much appreciate that. Daniel is on the line in Epsom. He's not a first-time caller, but he is a long-time listener. Daniel, great to have you on the show. What do you want to say and what do you want to talk about?
Yeah, happy Monday, guys.
Honestly, we've been really cheery, haven't we?
We have, I know. I've just paid tax myself, actually, higher rate taxpayer, and it was quite painful, I've got to be honest.
It always is.
Yeah, I just think that this Labour government, I mean, obviously it's woeful. It's the worst government I've ever seen in living memory. But I just don't think anyone in Westminster understands this illegal immigration problem, the optics of it, what it looks like. It's emblematic of a government not in control. And it also means that they can't really govern or do anything, because as soon as they say to me, well, we've got a housing crisis, everyone listening goes, yeah, because you've allowed millions of people in. Then they say, well, strengthen security in our abroad. We must be secure. And I'm thinking, well, our women and children are in more danger because you're allowing millions of people in from the third world that we didn't want or ask for. You know, our borders are so porous. Every single day that this Labour government doesn't do anything about it, another hundreds more people will vote reform.
I think you're quite right. I really do. I mean, again, exactly, whenever there's an issue, and there are two different issues, aren't there? There's illegal migration and legal migration. The legal migration is on an absolutely epic scale. We have those latest figures. What was it? A city the size of Bristol. Not the size of Birmingham as it's been, but the size of Bristol, as if that makes it okay, more coming to the country. But the illegal migration, I mean, those figures, almost 1,200 more people, well, 12 arriving on Channel boats just on Saturday alone. Looks like 50,000 arriving on boats this year on the current trajectory. What do you want done about that?
Well, the illegal immigration problem in Britain has to be stopped. If they don't stop it, it's going to bring down every government that doesn't deal with it. It's going to bring down the government. Right, and they don't seem to understand it. I'll tell you what will happen. The next terrorist incident or the next lone wolf attack from someone who wasn't supposed to be here that came across on the boat, the ensuing public unrest and riots that take place will... I mean, bearing in mind, everyone listening, Parliament and Whitehall are our buildings, OK? They belong to us. They're ours. And the MPs are supposed to work for us. If they don't do what the majority want, we're quite well within our rights to take our buildings back over and say, right, we have to start again. You're not doing what we've asked you to do. There's nothing wrong with revolt. There's nothing wrong with it. In other countries, they would have already taken to the streets by now. And,
well, in France, they absolutely do, don't they? Daniel, I really appreciate that call. Thank you very much. Just got some breaking news for you. You'll remember the case of Hamit Choskan. He was prosecuted after setting fire to a Quran, his own Quran, outside the Turkish consulate. He fled Turkey himself following persecution. He was accused of posing a threat to public order after burning the book in February. He said it was a peaceful protest. He was actually violently attacked by a man who allegedly slashed at him with a knife before kicking him after he fell to the ground. He was on trial at Westminster Magistrate Court, accused of public order offences, accused of carrying out disorderly behaviour within the hearing or sight of a person likely to have caused harassment, alarm or distress by burning a copy of the Quran. It was also claimed that he was motivated by hostility towards members of a religious group, namely the followers of Islam. The verdict has just been given, pronounced guilty at the court of that crime. I have to say, an awful lot of us, he wasn't prosecuted under a blasphemy law because we don't have one in this country anymore. But this feels like it is a blasphemy prosecution, does it not? Sam Armstrong, not only a Conservative commentator, you also do a lot of work with the Free Speech Union. You've been very much involved in this case with Hamit Choskan. Talk us through this verdict.
Well, the first thing is to say we do now have a blasphemy law in this country. That is the undeniable logic of this verdict. It says you cannot express strident, trenchant criticisms of Islam in the way that you would like, which includes the desecration of holy books, because of the reaction, because of the likely extreme reaction of Muslim people in this country. And in a sense, that's fair. When Hamit Choskan acted in this way, he was immediately the victim of a, in my view, terroristic attack in which he was slashed at with a knife by an attacker that we can't name for legal reasons, who
is being prosecuted,
but who has been prosecuted, frankly, for an incredibly unserious charge that doesn't meet the conduct, in my view, of what he did. There was an inordinate amount of two-tier justice that we're seeing here.
What a surprise!
But what we're seeing is very clear. If you burn a Quran, they're going to haul you before the courts. He's only going to get a fine, but they reserve the right to arrest you when they do it.
I think most of us would say, as a general rule, wouldn't go around burning other people. I wouldn't go around burning any book, but burning other people's holy books. But this thing's... I don't think there would be an arrest if he'd burnt a Bible.
No, and we should be very clear. The judge said it was especially provocative because of Muslims.
He actually said that.
He said that Hamid Choskan should have protested in a less provocative way.
But he wasn't protesting outside a mosque. He was protesting outside the Turkish consulate. He himself had fled Turkey because of persecution. What is his background? Why was he being persecuted?
He was persecuted because he's Armenian. He was persecuted because he was Kurdish, and he was persecuted because he'd repeatedly protested against the Islamization of Turkish politics. He has an age,
which is certainly happening.
He was the victim of a terroristic attack. His brother was murdered. He had spent 10 years in Turkey as a political prisoner. This man fled to the United Kingdom thinking he would be free, thinking that he would be able to express himself here freely.
And it was a book, so it was a book that he had bought, that he owned.
Correct.
And he was making a political protest.
Yes.
I thought our freedom of speech and freedom to protest legally, I thought that was protected
and by the
law.
right,
clearly not.
You have the right to burn a flag, to desecrate the flag in this country. That case was argued before the Court of Appeal. Who argued that case that said you should be able to burn a flag as a young barrister?
Keir Starmer?
One young Keir Starmer. He, in fact, argued that case wearing a pair of Stars and Stripes underpants that he sat down on as he was arguing at each point of that case. In this country, there is two-tier justice. If you're making a left-wing political protest, do what you like.
Blasphemy laws were you can walk around with a Hezbollah or Hamas flag quite happily. On ISIS flag, it would appear in this country. It's supposed to be against the law, but police won't intervene if you're on an anti-Israel protest. But blasphemy laws were got rid of. But only a few months ago, we had a Labour backbench MP, a Muslim, get up and speak and say about how we should bring in blasphemy laws to protect, offending Muslims with the Quran. And the Prime Minister did not say, no, we don't believe in blasphemy laws. We wouldn't do that in this country. Freedom of speech is the right to criticise all religions, fundamental part of freedom in a democracy. He kind of nodded along, didn't he? That was a very worrying moment.
And I know why, and you know why, and everyone listening along to this knows why, and everybody knows why Hamid Choskan was prosecuted, as are a number of other cases before the courts, which is in July last year, Keir Starmer saw a great result everywhere except in inner cities where Labour had a strong track record, where they lost 5 seats to quote-unquote pro-Gaza independence. We know what that means. We know what's being spoken about. The Prime Minister is terrified of aggravating a small chunk of people in this country who are not Muslim, who are not peace-loving people, but believe in Islamist politics, who believe in imposing a political view based upon their religion. This Prime Minister is terrified of upsetting them because he knows he could lose more seats at the next election. He knows he might need them, given how many votes he's losing left, right and centre to reform. And as a result, he is attempting to impose a de facto blasphemy law, the type of which we have never known in this country.
I'd love your response to this. 0344 499 1000. We'll get the response actually. Ben Habib, he's the former deputy leader of Reform UK. We're talking to him about immigration and plenty more besides, but I'm sure he'll want to have his say on this as well. This is Talk. We're the home of common sense.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Welcome back to the show. 12:39 is the time. Just a reminder of that breaking news. Brought you here first at Talk. A man who was on trial for burning a Quran. He's now basically been convicted. This is Hamid Choskan. He burnt a Quran outside the Turkish consulate. He himself has fled Turkey, but he has actually been convicted of carrying out disorderly behaviour within the hearing or sight of a person likely to have caused harassment, alarm or distress by burning a copy of the Quran, motivated by hostility towards members of a religious group. I didn't think we had a blasphemy law in our country. We certainly haven't had one for some years. Officially, we do now have a blasphemy law. Right now, let's talk to Ben Habib. He's the former deputy leader of Reform UK. Ben, I wanted you to talk about migration, but I'm sure you want to give your response to that extraordinary news that a man has been convicted for setting fire to his own book.
I completely agree with your analysis and Sam Armstrong's analysis. This is the introduction of an overt blasphemy law. If you're not able, as vile as it might be to burn any book, if you're prohibited from doing it and you're incarcerated for doing it, that's basically a blasphemy law. And it's a very, very sad day for the United Kingdom that this should have happened. The only point I would perhaps develop a bit on what Sam said is I completely agree that the Prime Minister is no doubt petrified of what the Muslim communities in this country may do with their votes. But I suspect that the Prime Minister, not suspect, I know actually, I'm not going to beat around the bush. The Prime Minister's sympathies aren't with the Christian majority in this country. The Prime Minister, and I would say vast majority of his front bench, actually believe in the vastly damaging experiment of multiculturalism. Yeah. They see some benefits coming from having lots of disparate cultures which haven't integrated into our basically Christian heritage in this country. They see that as a positive. And on their heads be it, frankly, because it's the experiment that they have played and it's not paying off for the British people.
It certainly isn't paying off the British people. We've been talking a lot today about the defence, strategic defence review and about protecting our country. A lot of people are pointing out, not even able to protect our borders when it comes to men who aren't even armed with a passport, let alone a rifle or any other weaponry coming to our shores. We've now got a prediction of some 50,000 illegal channel migrants. That's just the ones coming across on the dinghies, not the ones who are coming across on the lorries, still in the back of the lorries, not the ones who are coming here legally on a tourist, work or student visa and then miraculously discover that actually they're really an asylum seeker when they're supposed to go back to their home country. On Saturday alone, we had almost 1,200 people arrive just in one day. What do we do about this? Because it does seem that, Rishi Sunak didn't stop the boats and it doesn't seem like the current Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, is smashing the gangs.
So, an extension of the terrible experiment that has been multiculturalism and the promotion of effectively foreign cultures to the detriment of British culture, an absolute bedfellow of that ideology is that anyone who wishes to come to the United Kingdom pretty much should be allowed to come in. There's not a recognition of the requirement to protect British civil society or that being a British citizen affords you any particular rights in this country. The basic form of governance that we practice is that, everyone is essentially welcome. And in the pursuit of this welcoming approach that we have, we've taken down our borders in every sense, both legally as well as those seeking to enter the country illegally. There's no control exercised on it because it suits the Prime Minister and so many of his colleagues and predecessors' effective ideology. And it does seem absolutely, if not ironic, at least paradoxical, perhaps the Prime Minister could explain, that he has any eye on the defence of the country when he's not prepared to enforce our borders. Why waste money on the military if you can simply cross the channel unarmed?
This is the interesting thing, and again we have the concerns about these recent claims that Iranians were smuggled into the country to carry out terror attacks, on these boats. There's no doubt at all. We've had numerous reports from our security agencies saying this is an issue. What's interesting today, though, is a leading French MP. This is Eleanor Carrois. She's a member of Macron's Renaissance Party in the French National Assembly. She has blamed Britain's decision to quit the EU for the surge in migrants crossing the Channel in small boats. Of course she has. She said the numbers have been increasing since Brexit, which meant that Britain no longer had a returns agreement with the EU and a very weak asylum policy. She said, we represent an El Dorado for migrants because of our attractive benefits and asylum system. Ain't that the truth? She's right about one thing. But she basically said, look, we provide the demand for them and they know they're not going to be returned because of Brexit. Is that a fair argument?
No, it's absolute garbage. The reason we've got a problem in this country is, in significant part, I would say, because of the EU, because of the Schengen zone, because there are no borders in Europe. We've talked about how our country is now governed without borders. It's actually formally the case in the European Union that there are no borders if you're a member of the Schengen zone. So once you arrive in Italy or the Balkans or Greece, you can make your way across Europe without any impediment, without anyone challenging you, get to the beaches of Calais, and then you get the insipid British response at the border of our territorial waters. I wouldn't say insipid. You get a cup of tea and a Kit Kat and a warm blanket, then you get
free dental care at home.
Absolutely. And it's a complete collapse in political will across Western civilization to protect our civil society. It's a complete collapse, and it affects Europe as much as it affects the United Kingdom.
Although it's interesting, some actions being taken in Europe now, which obviously, if they were being done here, Keir Starmer would totally disapprove of. Just so you know, Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary for the Conservatives, he's challenging the government today to halt the fishing deal we've got, which is basically handing over our fishing rights for another 12 years. It's mind-blowingly, no one can understand why, until France makes good on its pledge to stop the small boats at sea rather than paying their police officers to video it and smoke their gauloises on the beach while its people smugglers make their fortunes. It's understood, actually, interesting, that Stephen Wolfe has put together some figures and suggested actually we're looking at £1 billion being earned by the migrant smugglers since 2018, making so much money on these boat crossings. But actually, we should be talking a little bit tough. We're giving what, £500 million a year to the French to stop people getting in the boats. They're not stopping people getting in the boats. You don't get rights to our fishing waters. Would you agree with that?
I mean, as the illegal crossings have multiplied, we've given France more and more money. Actually, what we've in effect created is a positive loop between the more people they send us and the more money we give them. They recognise, therefore, that they've got to keep this trade going in order to get our money. We've the complete moral hazard in our approach with dealing with the French. What we need to be is tough with the French. And absolutely remove their fishing licenses. Of course, that would be the end of the trade and cooperation agreement that we've entered into with the EU, and I would be delighted by that. But actually, fundamentally, Julia, it comes back to simply enforcing our borders. There is no excuse for not doing that. And you might recall last week there was a Dunkirk celebration with a flotilla of British boats celebrating the terrific evacuation of British troops in 1940. And it had to make way for some dinghies that wanted to get from France to the United Kingdom illegally.
Just national humiliation.
The imagery of the imagery is sickening.
Ben Habib, really enjoy having you on. Thank you so much for joining us. Former Deputy Leader of Reform UK. I think he speaks for an awful lot of our audience there. Sam Armstrong, do you not?
This isn't that complicated.
It's not, though, is it? You're right, that's the thing. It just isn't.
Just do what you promised you would do to the British public. Do what is necessary. Get it done. You can stop it tomorrow. This is a world, this is a country, this is society. We can get submarines under water that nuclear powered that can wipe out Moscow tomorrow. We can stop guys coming across the border in Channel.
And if we can't, if you're a Prime Minister, you can't stop it. You shouldn't be Prime Minister.
They can stop it. They are choosing not to.
Where there's a will, there's a way.
Insult.
12:48 is the time. We're going to take a quick break. Up next, going to be talking to the Institute of Economic Affairs, Chris Snowdon, about that disposable vape ban that came in yesterday. But could it actually have the opposite effect that all the advocates think it will have? Could it actually turn people back to cigarettes? That's up next. This is Talk.
This is a positive action scheme, and as such, you must be from a black, Asian or minority ethnic background in order to apply. In other words, whites need not apply.
So no one at this table.
That is racist.
Correct.
Is it not?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's racist. The Equalities Commission would love to see that, I'm sure.
So they're not Baptist planks, but they've broken the law.
But this has been going on for a while, hasn't it?
Especially the BBC.
West Yorkshire Police have done it.
The BBC are particularly bad at this. They've done it in other areas as well. And I don't understand how they can get away with it.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. Well, it's a small matter of trying to defend the realm from either migrants or from, the Russian invading hordes, but also a small matter of dealing with smoking, because that's the stuff that really matters to an awful lot of people who are trying to control everything that we do. And what they wanted to do was get us off cigarettes. So a lot of people who smoke moved on to vapes. Some of them moved on to disposable vapes, and then they decided they weren't good either. So as of Sunday, there is a ban on disposable vapes, and it's actually, and if you don't recycle and if you've still got some in your cupboards, you could be prosecuted for that. But could this ban on disposable vapes actually have the opposite effect and turn people back to cigarettes? Let's talk to Chris Snowdon. He's head of lifestyle economics at the Institute of Economic Affairs, the free market think tank, and ask him. Good afternoon to you, Chris.
Hello,
Thank you for joining us. There were lots of different reasons given for the disposable vape ban. One was, vaping's bad. Cigarettes bad, but vaping also bad. And then it was the littering, and then it was the recycling and these bits of plastic and batteries, and they're being littered everywhere. But also it's very bad for the environment that these stuff they're used once and then thrown away. Do you think they actually ever decided which was the actual reason, or is it still all three for the ban?
They used environmental legislation to bring about the ban, so I guess in theory it was primarily an environmental thing, which, by the way, could have been dealt with by using some kind of deposit scheme, I think.
For people to return.
Talking about the deposit scheme with bottles and cans, which actually wouldn't be very cost effective, but with disposable vapes it could well have been. So yeah, it's primarily that, but I think as time goes on, people will be framing it more and more as an anti-vaping policy in general, because people are going to want to have more and more anti-vaping policies, and that's one of the main reasons I object to this. Is I've learned over the years not to give these people an inch.
Yeah, well, you're the one who's been talking about the slippery slope. And I mean, I was in favour of the smoking ban. I don't like cigarettes. I don't smoke. 2007, I was absolutely thrilled. I could go to the pub and not be coming home absolutely stinking of other people's smoke. But I've told you this many times over the years, persuaded me of the slippery slope on these things, because vaping was at first hailed as, a brilliant alternative to smoking. People who wanted to smoke but didn't want the health risk, which are huge with smoking, would turn to vaping. It's been one of the biggest success stories in terms of getting people off cigarettes, has it not?
Yeah, it has. It's been absolutely
even
incredible.
You?
Even me, exactly, years ago now. So we are throwing the baby out with the bathwater now with this. I mean, what happened was, yes, loads of people like me did give up smoking, and lots of people have probably never started smoking because they vaped instead. But it's those people, the never smokers, and there are far fewer underage vapers actually than you might think from reading the papers.
Oh, we're told, isn't it, like 1 in 5 kids have vaped and
maybe tried it once in their lives. But if you look at the number of kids who are actually using them on a regular basis, it's really small.
Yeah.
1 or 2%, I think.
And probably no more than would smoked anyway.
Yeah, indeed, yeah. So, I mean, I think it's reasonable to say that most, if not all, of the kids who are vaping, although we don't condone it, would probably be smoking otherwise. And indeed, that might well be one of the consequences of banning disposable vapes. That you've got people like, for example, Claire Fox, who gave up smoking quite recently by using disposable vapes, doesn't really like other forms of vapes. There's a risk that they are going to go back to smoking, and certainly some of the younger people. We know from survey evidence that a significant proportion say they will definitely go back to smoking. 20% say they will go back to smoking. So this is not a great move in terms of public.
But wasn't the argument that it was younger people, it was kids who were buying vapes, and that they, because they were cheaper, because they were single use, and that was getting more kids into vaping? It seemed to me that can't you just enforce the law that makes it illegal to sell to under 18s, in which a nice big 50 grand fine for a few shopkeepers might focus the minds very, very quickly. Plus the littering issue. why don't we start actually prosecuting people for littering? I watch people litter in front of police officers who do absolutely nothing. I mean, God, if they'd misgendered the litter, then they would have been prosecuted, wouldn't they, or to tweet about it. But it seems we've got in the law to deal with something where there are actually laws already in place to deal with all of those issues.
Yeah, it's a classic example of something you see all the time now, which is the state unable to or unwilling to enforce existing laws, and therefore politicians respond by basically banning things again. Or banning something else that's related to it. We don't ban the sale of alcohol just because some kids consume alcohol. What we try and do is we enforce the law on selling the sale of alcohol, and indeed cigarettes. It's really quite hard now for kids to get hold of cigarettes legally, at least, and indeed many of them are not even getting hold of the vapes themselves legally. There's a very, very large part of the market, even before yesterday's ban, that was made up of illicit vapes, and that will definitely go up next year when this big vape tax comes in. So we're just digging ourselves a bigger and bigger hole here, rather than just trying to enforce the perfectly reasonable laws we already had.
It is utterly bizarre how wrong they get it. But again, this all comes down, this is all the nanny state. It's anti-smoking, it's anti-alcohol, constantly telling people, lower and lower. I mean, you go to the doctor, how many units do you drink a week? I don't know, what's the latest rule? What's this week's rule about what's safe? And then we're told about, what we can eat. I mean, pretty much every single thing they're trying to control in our lives. Is it because they just think we're all stupid?
Yes, the people in public health certainly do. But I think for governments, there's an element of displacement about it. I mean, Britain is more or less a failed state now. France is also a failed state. They introduced this or announced this ban on outdoor smoking on Friday. Then the following day, Paris is up in flames. People are dying because of raucous celebrations, as The Guardian described them, after a football match. This is a narco-tyranny. We are just pouring more and more stupid and petty legislation onto the dwindling number of law-abiding people while we watch rampant lawlessness throughout society.
That's a very, very good point. Chris Snowden, so appreciate you joining us. I know you've been fantastic on this issue. He's from the Institute of Economic Affairs. Sam Armstrong, I mean, honestly, Chris has totally persuaded me on the slippery slope argument. I still want to be able to go to a pub and a restaurant and not have cigarette smoke blown in my face. I'll stick to that one. But they do just want to supposedly protect us from everything, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, today's whole show, I mean, we've got war round the corner. We've got tens of thousands of people pouring into this country illegally. We've got no idea. We've got a blasphemy law back, but it's okay because we're going to ban vaping at pubs anytime
It's just
now.
not the issue. But again, in my day, kids were sniffing glue. I'm thinking vaping is... We were one of the few countries that were sane on vaping, and actually NHS endorsing it, saying it's not completely safe, absolutely not, but it's a darn sight safer than cigarettes. So if those are the options, we choose vaping over cigarettes. I know so many people who have given up cigs because of vaping.
There's a study out today that says a third of pubs are on the verge of closing down any day now. And what does this government want to do? It wants to make it more difficult to sit outside in a pub garden, have a cigarette, sit around
absolute
and have a vape.
madness.
Totally
you know what I want to do though? I want to give up. I want to give up Ian Collins, but I just can't do it.
I know.
He's here
It's
in
very
the
hard to
studio.
do. Do you know, I went to the cinema with the kids at the weekend.